question 2.
It's live.
So I should wait for the second panel, right, Nicole?
Yes.
Which is about 4. What time do you think?
We'll probably kick this one off. We're going to try to stay as close to the time frame that we have listed.
Okay. I'm just going to answer some emails then.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
Go ahead. You can log in at your designated time frame.
Okay.
Maybe we'll try, like I said, we're going to try to keep it tight.
Okay.
Maybe just a 5-minute delay.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No, thank you. Appreciate your patience, everyone.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Oh, and Nicole, you don't have to say my middle name if you don't want to. You just go Mariel Myers. I'll save you the having to say the middle name.
All right. All right. Hi, everyone. We were having some technical difficulties, but we've got them sorted out. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We are waiting for one of my colleagues, Sabrina Taylor, to join us.
I'm back.
Oh, there's your beautiful face. How are you?
I'm trying to get my resting positive face back. So, yeah. Shall we start from the top, or do you want to pick up right from?
Let's start from the top.
Let's start from the top.
I think we have a few friends from YouTube that have joined.
And we're sending Facebook to YouTube right now. So that's great. All right. Collective Wusa. All right. Thank you for joining us today. We're getting off a little bit late, but we wanted to extend the conversation that ABC-owned television stations did for Our America Living While Black. Ebony recognized what ABC did was groundbreaking. Never before has Ebony seen a primetime evening newscast dedicate 10 minutes of its real estate to a docu-series that focused on Black Americans, their families, and some of the trials and tribulations that we faced being in America, living while Black. So ABC owned televisions was very kind to let us extend the conversation here. And what we wanted to do was give a platform for people to be able to come here and talk to the people who were showcased on the docu-series. And we know that this could not have happened without the amazing commitment of Disney, ABC-owned television stations. And I will say very clearly that this is, we have no association and affiliation with ABC-owned television stations. Our America, Living While Black, the opinions that might be expressed by panel members today here are not representative of ABC-owned television stations or Walt Disney Company. They are purely Ebony's and all of yours. And, you know, the team over there opened the door for us, but it took a dynamic duo, well, quad over there, Nicole, right?
Actually, sextuplets? I don't know.
Sextuplets?
Whatever the word is for 6 people. Yes, ABC's superstars over there that made this series happen are amazing, and we are uberly thankful for shedding light onto, you know, what we go through on a daily basis, which is truly unfortunate that African Americans and Black Americans and Black people across the world have to deal with these inequalities simply based on the color of our skin. But with us today, we have Monica Barnes, who is out of Raleigh, Durham. She is the Community Engagement Director. We have Maxine Crooks, who is the VP of Talent Development. And we have Mariel Myers out of San Francisco. She is the Executive Producer of Premium Content and Development for the ABC affiliate up there. We are so grateful and thankful to have you ladies with us today. We got off to a slow start as we were having technical issues, but we definitely want to dive in and get to the bottom of, you know, why you guys came up with this amazing idea, how you were able to make it happen. So first up, what was the motivation to producing the docu-series? Maxine?
Yeah, sure. Well, the motivation, Nicole, is that we recognized the needs of our audience. You know, we recognize that that kind of content will resonate with our audience, and through research and just through a desire to do this kind of content, we knew that this would resonate. And you know, once we decided this is the direction we were going to take, you know, we brought everybody together, the premium content teams from all of the owned television stations, all 8 owned television stations, and people, you know, it was just a tremendous amount of story pitches that we received for this, you know, over 100. I think it was 116 was the final count. And through those story pitches, you know, we found the amazing folks that you saw featured in this content. So it's recognizing the need, understanding the moment, and you know, it just truly became a passion project for all of us.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the moment is truly a moment, and we've been living through this moment for hundreds of years. And through the BLM movement, the rest of the world has now come to an understanding of what we have to deal with on a regular basis. And it is tough being Black in America. Can you just talk about the 5 parts of the series that you guys whittled it down to from the hundreds you received?
Yeah, I can talk about that, Nicole. So yeah, it was like Maxine said, it was an incredible amount of outpouring of stories, and we, you know, really wanted to look at the issues that we felt, you know, really deserved the most attention, which were healthcare, but done from the lens of really maternal healthcare deserts. We did that out of Chicago. We also looked at, you know, education. We looked at generational wealth and the barriers to trying to establish that. We looked at something we called honoring the past and continuing heritage. And the last one we did was about policing. And I will say, especially about that 4th one, about heritage. We actually did not have that story bucket initially. And when we got the stories in, we were like, wow, this is really powerful storytelling. And these are not really stories that we often hear about descendants of slaves, Black farmers. So I think, we were really happy to be able to frankly find a home for those and put them together in a way that, people could really hear a different story, than what they're traditionally, will see on the local, their local news every night.
Absolutely. I was really unaware of the whole plight of the Black farmer. Last year for Juneteenth, we did a virtual event similar to this, and we had a segment where we had Black farmers come and discuss, what they were going through on a regular basis, and I was completely unaware. So, additionally, being able to bring light to these types of things, that's what it's all about, bringing awareness so that change can actually be made. And can we just talk about the power of our storytelling and reporting and the ability it has to influence and change the way people and issues are perceived? What do you hope the audience will take away from this docu-series?
Well,
We haven't heard from Monica yet, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, sure. One of the things I'd like to share with that, and we'll just kind of go back for a moment. Yes, we did the research. We know what resonates with our viewers, but one thing that being a community person, community engagement for the station group, we need to hear it from the people. Now is the time where you don't always tell people what you think they want to know. You ask them, what do you want to know?
Right.
And so these were opportunities for them to tell their stories. And with telling the stories, we thought, wow, this is powerful. We hope that people will take away that these are authentic, coming from voices of people who are living it every day. Even though there are trials and tribulations in this, because there are struggles, but look at the hope. You could hear the hope and the success stories in there too. So you talk about Black folk being a resilient people, a people who, we find a way, we make a way. We will tell you the realities of our struggles, but then too, there's the other side of it. And that's what we wanted people to see, along with those teachable moments, because we added stats to it, which we think are really important. This family is this way because guess what? This policy was here, or slavery was this long, or, stats, so people could really connect the dots and understand more about the Black experience in America, living while Black. So I think that's one of the things that we wanted people to take away too.
Monica, you're right. We are such an expressive people. And, I really want to turn the focus back to your amazing team. Even the ones that are sitting there silently, like Alita and Nzinga, the whole team. It's a dedicated group of passionate individuals that came around to create this project. So much of these issues, I could tell, were personal because the way you told them, they were personal to all of you. I'd like to ask some of you, Maxine, Monica, most of you, could you share some of your own experiences on how you are guided to tell stories such as this?
Well, I think the place that you come from is usually your guide when you're telling these kind of stories. And that's why, when you have diverse voices, in storytelling or in any place of business, it matters because you're telling stories from your perspective. And it was important for us to be able to, as Monica said, tell the stories from the people's perspective. In this case, the people involved in this were the experts. It was their voices that we were hearing, and their voices resonated with us who have lived that experience as a Black woman, as a Caribbean American, person, your experiences, while not the same as a Caribbean American person, not the same as an African American person, it still resonates because you still have that experience of, biases and injustices. So you understand where these people are coming from, but in someone who's also had success, you understand resiliency and you understand hope. So I think we all brought our own perspective perspective from our life experiences. My background as an executive producer, I brought that to the table, just as Monica could bring her, her background, and Marielle could bring her immigrant background. We all have, experiences that came to life in this. I'll let Marielle and Monica talk about their own experiences.
Yeah, I'll say I'm a first generation immigrant. I'm half Filipino, I'm half Chinese. So I don't have a connection to America the same way, right? I don't have a legacy, I don't have a heritage. And I learned about America. I learned a certain part about America. I learned so much about America that I didn't know in this series. And really seeing the connection to America in this way that's multi-generational, I just found that to be really empowering to me. That really made me want to, frankly, just learn so much more. So I thought that was really just empowering for me in a personal way.
Well, the station group, we're in different parts of the country, but the only two stations that are in the South, Texas and North Carolina. Texas is a different South than North Carolina. So the perspective as a baby boomer, Black woman growing up, here in the Jim Crow South, it brought some different perspectives, which is good because it's, as I said before, diversity of thought, diversity of perspective. Because yes, we're all Black, but the heritage doesn't come from the same place. It's Caribbean, it's African, it's Jamaican, it's all of that, and age, all of that is diversity of thought and perspective that really was rolled into this, that really made it authentic process. And let's be clear, we were able to convince others to let us come together and do it. It hadn't been done before. So,
right.
The company supported us in doing this and made sure that all those voices and all those perspectives were around the table. And that within itself is groundbreaking. That's great. Mm-hmm. And so we got that support and they let us run with it. And you can just imagine some of the conversations, all of us together kind of saying, well, I don't know about that picture because, we're kind of scared. But then you have another one says, yeah, and then you feel empowered. Okay, it's not just one person saying something. It's other people too, from diverse backgrounds, that you all come together and you learn from each other and you listen. And then you have that just leads to the best product. It just leads to the best outcome. And I think that's what happened here. And we're very proud of that and excited about that.
And that's why it's so important to have diversity in the room at the decision-making level, because without these voices from the different folks with different experiences, we get one point of view, which is unfortunate. So it's great that you guys were able to bring your point of views and the families, their each unique point of view. How were you able to find these families? I loved every single one of them.
Yeah, just really from the each station, we're so lucky that each of our stations is obviously tied to their community. So when we put out the call for pitches, they really did find these incredible stories out of their regions, and then we really trusted the producers in our stations to tell those stories because they are so tied to the communities. So we were very lucky, and I think what's really interesting in the story selections and the families that we had was that we did want some of them were emblematic of like larger stories, but then we were also able to highlight some unique stories that you don't often hear about. So we talked a little bit about the Black farmers already, but there was also a mother whose son is autistic and how she deals with policing. And there's a heartbreaking moment when she sort of describes how she had to introduce him to the police so they knew he was part of the community. And it's a moment for me where I was like, I'm a mom too, but it's obviously just a very different experience. So I think having those stories that are a little bit more singular and unique as well to tell their part of the story was really great. It was a great opportunity for us to also highlight those.
Yeah, it was groundbreaking, actually. Made me think, should I go introduce myself to the police station? To everybody at the police station, hey.
I have a nephew who is on the spectrum, and it has been one of my biggest fears because he just turned 18 and he's 6 feet, dark complected, big in stature. So it really, really touched me, the way the family took the approach they took. It's something I immediately sent a clip around to all of my family and asked them to watch. So again, we at Ebony cannot thank you ladies and ABC-owned televisions and the Walt Disney Company enough. And we really appreciate it. We want you to know we have a commitment to enhance and exemplify anything that you guys do in this space. You can count on us as a friend to help lift up what you do. We really, really appreciate it. And so thank you very much, ladies, for being here.
And thank you. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
you being here and all that you do. Congratulations on 75 years to Ebony.
Yeah,
Thank you.
congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You know, Nicole, I'm going to walk right into this next segment because it's so personal to me. I am just now able to talk freely and openly about I am a cancer survivor. I survived cancer last year, cervical cancer. It was one of the scariest experiences I had. I won't talk about what state I was in, not geographical state, mental state I was a wreck, but geographical, the state I was in, the healthcare that I was trying to get access to, they didn't hear me. They didn't listen to me. I had, I think, over 43 fibroids that compacted with just a cavalcade of issues. And it was difficult because I knew something was going on with my body. I just didn't know how to use the words or how to express myself in a way to get physicians to help. My story is not unique. The US medical establishment has had an extremely long legacy about discriminating and exploiting Black Americans, and the indelible memory of which remains deeply embedded into the collective consciousness of the Black community. If you're Black, Indigenous, or a person of color, you might feel a little extra anxiety that racial discrimination could keep concerns, you know, like mine from being heard from your medical professionals. So when our America Living Well Black focused on disparities in healthcare, it just touched me very, very deeply. There are existing racial, and we see it right now with COVID-19. It's very clear. It just sort of jumped to the forefront when you look at the people who are dealing with COVID-19 for socioeconomic reasons, but also health reasons. So the fact that there was a segment about disparity in healthcare opened and put back on the forefront, but on a national level, this conversation. So, you know, we have some of the best doctors on this call right now. We have Dr. April Spencer. I know that Dr. Ian Smith is on his way back in, and Dr. Dale Okorodudu. Did I say it right?
Perfect.
Okay. You know, I really would love to talk about health disparities, the fact that Black and Latino people are continuously disproportionately impacted by health ailments. You know, we see with COVID-19 what happens here. How do we fix this? Is it a community issue or a healthcare issue, or is it both?
So I'll take a stab at it first. First of all, thank you for having me. Really appreciate you letting me be part of this. So obviously it's a huge issue, and like you said, it goes way, way back to the start of American history, even before American history probably. It goes way, way back, so it's deeply rooted into American society. And when you say how do you fix it, it's almost overwhelming. There's so much to think about. You know, one thing which, so to answer your question, is both. It's definitely both. But one thing which I think we need to think about starting with is you have to have representation at the table first, right? Because one of the biggest issues is if you don't have people at the table who are there to help drive the agenda to even fix it, it's not going to get fixed. You know, you talk about healthcare disparities, but that deals with education disparities, right? That deals with economic disparities. It's such a big thing, but I think the starting point has to be you have to have the right people at the table to drive that agenda.
I just wanted to jump in really quickly. I appreciate the ladies from ABC owned news stations talking with us. Feel free to stay on board if you'd like, but you can pop off. I don't want to hold you guys hostage. I know you have a lot of work to do. So thank you so much for your time. We truly appreciate your insight and everything that you guys have done and are going to do. And we look forward to seeing all of your magic that you create in the near future. So thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
And I know there he is. Dr. Smith is back. Welcome back, just in time. I got a FaceTime call from one of my daughter's friends, and it kind of kicked me out for a second. So I apologize if you called on me, Sabrina. And
No, I would really love to hear Dr. April Spencer and Dr. Ian Smith. You know, I would love to hear your opinions. You know, is this, do you guys believe the disparity is it a healthcare issue or is it a community issue? You know, where do you think it stems from in 2020? We know historically, why is it persisting?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that question, Ms. Taylor, and definitely thank you so much for extending an invitation for me to be on the panel. It's an extremely important discussion that we're having today. I think what COVID-19 has exposed in this disparity is that it has always been there. It's like COVID-19 is a microcosm of what has been going on in healthcare. The thing that we have been engaging in for a very long time, historically and presently, is instead of engaging in healthcare, we've been engaging in sick care. And therein lies an opportunity for us to be able to minimize that disparity. But I'm really glad that we allowed this platform so we can at least have a conversation. I always feel like change first starts with having a conversation. And as a breast cancer surgeon, I see firsthand disparities amongst people of color in terms of treatment, diagnosis, the systemic racism, the gender bias that occurs. It's very real. And COVID just put a highlight on what was already there. So it certainly exists. And it's not something that's imagined. And one of the things that we have to do is we have to be very proactive in terms of acknowledging it. And once we're aware of it, then what do we do about it? So we've got to move from awareness to action. And I think this platform allows us the opportunity to engage with thought leaders on what can we do to address it now that we know that it exists. And in healthcare, my colleagues will share with you, we've known about this for a very long time. And so this is not, it's almost like a dirty little secret. We don't talk about it, but it's ever present. And a lot of my patients would nearly die because they have felt so disenfranchised in the healthcare system with the systemic racism that they won't seek a second or a third opinion. They feel it's status quo. And so I'm, again, just very glad that we're having this conversation, but it's certainly ever present.
that is so discouraging to hear. I've been kind of aware of the current healthcare situation, and I strive to find doctors who are Black. All my doctors are Black. As I mentioned, my daughter's 6, her pediatrician is a Black woman. I just know that we will put in the time to care for each other the way others may not.
And then trust factor is an issue. So oftentimes when you're being cared for by someone that looks like you, you feel more inclined to be on board with the treatment plan and not feel suspicious of the healthcare system. Many of us are still stained by the Tuskegee experiment and Henrietta Lacks, and there are countless of other untold stories like Mississippi appendectomies, where women would come in for an appendectomy and leave with a hysterectomy, particularly in the Southeast. So a lot of times it is so important, like you mentioned, Nicole, that you have your children to see people that look like them, to have our mothers, who usually are the front runners and the driving force behind healthcare, to be taken care of by OBGYNs of color, because we in the medical community, clinicians, the onus is on us to try to engage with our communities and help increase the education. And that is where the opportunity lies, where we can educate patients on what's appropriate and what's not, and encourage people to seek a second opinion. And in a lot of communities of color, Asian community, Latino community, it's seen as defiance and disrespectful if you question the clinician or if you feel like you need to go somewhere else. I would say the majority of my second opinions for breast cancer is not that people want to be told something differently. They just want to be told with more compassion and understanding. And so, yeah, so it's super important that we're continuing this conversation.
Absolutely. And Dr. Ian, definitely wants you to jump in here too. And just in general, when dealing with patients, I mean, physicians are under a ton of real life pressure. I mean, we're given an appointment with a certain amount of time allotted, 15, 20 minutes to get patients in and out. And, you know, I think that can kind of add to doctors' perception of shipping people of color in and out quickly and giving people that are of the majority a little bit more time in care. Should we be blaming a dysfunctional healthcare system instead of race, or
Well, I think it's a multifaceted problem. You know, first of all, let me just say that I think, you know, we've been talking about health disparities. I've sat on so many of these panels talking about health disparities over the course of my career. I can't even tell you how many. And it gets somewhat frustrating because, you know, it's, as Dr. April said, it's not just about awareness, it's about finding solutions. We've got to decide to move to the next phase, which is figure out some concrete steps that we need to take, both small and large. In my opinion, you look at the large approach, which is the system. There is a tremendous amount of systemic racism in healthcare from the top down, and that's got to be addressed in a certain way. Then the other component, the other big bucket, is the community. The community has got to figure out how to use community stakeholders to educate, to inform, and to care for our populations. We can't rely exclusively on a system that is already set up against us to save us and treat us and do right by us. We can't wait for that. We've been waiting for too long for that. We got to figure out, and let me give you an example. You know, churches. I know the church numbers are down, not just because of COVID, but in general. You know, the Black church was a staple of the family. It's not as well attended as it used to be. But churches, for example, they have to do health fairs. They got to bring in doctors. They got to educate people. They have to talk about obesity more. You know, you look at obesity in African Americans, and you look at all the diseases that stem from obesity: heart disease, stroke, diabetes, kidney disease as a result of diabetes. All these things come off of obesity. We have to be serious about attacking that. What does that mean? We have to figure out how to get fresh produce into these deserts, these food deserts that exist. We got to have churches or community centers be able to, you know, feed people healthier foods. We have to give people exercise classes that aren't overly expensive, but something that people can afford. We really have to start talking about where the solutions are. And to April's point also, yes, we need more African-American doctors. There's not about, I did something with Dr. Oz last month, trying to get more minorities into the healthcare space, because study after study has shown that when African-American physicians treat patients, African-American patients, it actually saves lives. That's not to say that white doctors can't treat Black patients. That's not what that's saying. But there's something about an African-American physician and an African-American patient and the trust and the willing to be compliant to treatment that makes a difference.
For sure.
Well, I'm putting my money where your mouth is, and I am actually actively trying to put some of your tips and your simple steps together, Dr. Ian, to get my body to look a little bit like my colleague Nicole's. Not everyone can be almost qualify for the Olympics as a runner as she was. She's in perfect health.
I don't know if I would go that far.
But we have a trifecta here. We have, it seems we have like the internist, the physical therapists, we have the surgeon, we have them all here. But I wanted to talk about, current news right now. We keep hearing from Pfizer and Moderna, these COVID vaccines that are right on the precipice of being available. So we all know, bringing up the Tuskegee topic and Henrietta Lacks, and the fact that, I actually read a study that Black people are still enrolled in tests and studies that we don't even know that we're being enrolled in. What can we do? What can Ebony do, and how can we support the medical profession to encourage people to take a vaccination when it's safe to take it? How do we know? How can we trust? What are your thoughts there?
Well, let me kick this off real fast. The data, all the data is not in yet. And the idea that people are a little reluctant about it is fair. You should always approach these kind of things with a fair degree of skepticism, but also with optimism. The early preliminary results show that they're about 95% effective. The side effects are very small so far. Yes, this was rushed. It was very fast. They're going to apply for an emergency authorization under the FDA to use these vaccines. But in order for these vaccines to be effective, 75% of the country needs to take it. So it's no good if just 50 million people take it. We need at least 200 and something plus million people to take it for it to work collectively against COVID. But African Americans need to listen to people who they trust. They need to listen to the researchers and the scientists and make sure that someone who they trust, like Ebony, has actually talked to the real experts and looked at the experts who actually looked at the data, looked at the safety data, the effectiveness data, and say, yes, these vaccines work. And when that happens, then people should feel more comfortable going to take it.
Dr. Dale, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree 100%. So, Dr. Smith mentioned these are large trials that are being done, right? So these vaccine trials, Moderna, Pfizer, these are 30,000 patients in the trials. And, a lot of the trials actually ended up doing a little bit of a better job enrolling, people of color into these trials as well. It definitely has to be a trust thing. You have to get the information from people you trust. We need to have forums across the country. Ebony, fraternities, sororities, all those things need to be holding these forums to get the information out. I don't want to get too technical, but for these two particular vaccines that are coming out, they're different than the vaccines we've seen in the past. It's a different type of vaccine. So because that's the case, it's even that much more important that we spend the time, educating people, educating patients, the population about these vaccines, because once people start to actually understand it's a different vaccine, they're going to have a whole lot more questions. I mean, I'm a physician, I'm an ICU doctor, I take care of COVID patients on a daily basis, always reading about this stuff. But once I learned how the vaccines were working, I had my own questions too. So it's going to be a process. It's definitely going to be a process,
Mm-hmm. But I think it's really important that we emphasize the role of platforms like Ebony because it's a trusted platform with your readership and also your viewership. And so if we're able to just continue to collaborate and get the word out about the efficacy and also the risk versus the benefits, and that usually the benefits outweigh the inherent risks of any vaccine, particularly in African-American population and people of color, because oftentimes we have pre-existing medical conditions like diabetes and high blood pressure, and our environment oftentimes is toxic in a sense that is difficult to socially distance, because many people of color oftentimes live in multi-generational households where it's difficult to social distance, and these same members of the household oftentimes can't work from home because they're essential workers. And so social distance is very difficult. So it's even more imperative that this very vulnerable group are made aware of the importance of the vaccine and that the benefits outweigh the risks. And so it's not communicating that there aren't any risks involved, but again, it's a benefit risk analysis. And if Ebony can continue to help educate people of color on the importance of the benefits outweighing the risks, i.e. death, because African Americans and people of color have a higher mortality rate than any other demographic in this whole COVID crisis, I think it's going to be essential for longevity and for mortality and for us getting through this, but also making sure that it reminds us that it's important to try to engage in healthcare and not sick care and get the diabetes, the asthma, and all these things under better control so that we can handle these insults like COVID as they arise.
And Sabrina, let me just jump in here real fast and say this. Number one, we got to give people facts. We got to explain to people that the COVID vaccine is not going to give you COVID. People need to know these basic things so they are not fear of the actual vaccination. The other thing is that while Ebony is a big platform and a trusted platform, Dr. Dale, Dr. April, myself, other Black doctors, we got to go on social media, regardless of how big or large our following is. And we got to explain to people what this really is. So we got to meet people where they are. So Dr. April going on her IG page or Facebook, whatever, and saying, guys, this is what the vaccine is. Here are some of the side effects. This is why you need to take it. You don't always have to reach 1 million people at once. If you can reach 100 people or 200 people, and they in turn can recommend someone else to come to your page to read or watch the video you put up, that can make a big difference. So all of us are in this and need to be involved in educating our people and the public at large.
Yeah.
Well, what a commitment we can give you here is that you send a message to Nicole and myself on something that you think we need to repost and get up, we will do that. We have a commitment. And Dr. Dale, I really want to thank you for being on the front line in the ICU. It means a lot to us. We know what you're dealing with. Mm-hmm. So again, any messaging that you guys feel like we need to use our platform to expand on, trust me, we'll do it. One of the things that we're proud of for 75 years is having a brand name that people trust. So if we can use that equity to spread the word, and we may tap you guys to use your faces to use the platform to do that. Yes. But we want you to know that you're welcome here at any time to do exactly that. And again, we thank ABC-owned television stations, the Walt Disney Network, for creating the conversation, or at least enhancing it, keeping it in the forefront. So thank you guys so much. And sorry we're running a little bit on CPT time, but we're family.
Yeah, we are family. And we will be, like Sabrina said, we're going to be continuing to reach out and have you guys back, because this is a very important topic right now. And we need to make sure that our people are aware of everything that's going on with this whole COVID movement. And we're going to use you to get the word out with us.
I just want to say, for those who are watching, I know we're leaving, my Instagram is at Dr. Ian Smith, spell the doctor out, I-A-N Smith. And I try to give as many tips as possible about COVID, about weight loss, things that apply to everybody, but particularly for our people. We just need to keep hearing the message. And, you know, people will listen eventually. It's not always the first time, but if you keep giving it to people, eventually at a little light bulb will turn and go off, and people will start, you know, paying attention and making some changes.
Absolutely. 100%.
And what we will do when we rebroadcast, because we had some technical difficulties at the top of this. When we rebroadcast, we will rebroadcast with everyone's social media. And, you know, actually, if there's anything else you want us to add, we're going to run it for a couple of days to make sure everyone gets to see it.
Yeah. Right. Caleb, you have your socials tagged on our social media currently as well.
Yes, Dr. Spencer?
I was just going to say, if you can just encourage those that are watching, if they have questions that we didn't get a chance to address, to DM us. I'm sure my colleague Ian would love that, and Dale as well, because sometimes it's difficult in these limited platforms to get all your questions out. That we would love to answer questions and maybe even do a part 2 amongst the physicians where we can just do live and people can.
Oh, we're doing that.
And ask questions in real time. Not to give you guys any more work.
Oh no, that is good work. That is good work. That's what we're here for.
Can I have one more? Yeah. Can I have one more thing? Something that I think I feel compelled to say this every time I do something is we need more Black doctors, right? So there's only so few of us trying to do all this work. We talk about trust and getting the message out. There's only a handful of us, right? So we need 5%. We should encourage the youth and the parents to encourage the youth to consider medicine as a career.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do what we can to try to foster that.
Yeah,
absolutely. But I think having your participation, like representation matters. And seeing you here on a platform like this, it's effective. So thank you again.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you guys so much. We appreciate you guys.
Stay safe. Wear your mask.
Yes, sir.
All right. Take care.
Mask on.
Mr. Alexander, we are running about 20 minutes behind to 30 minutes behind, so please bear with us.
Problem.
We're about to head into educational disparities, and so we're running a little bit behind for generational wealth. And I know your time is money, so please forgive us. But the school to prison, talking about educational disparities, I actually heard a term I had never heard of before, the school to prison pipeline. And so when I was thinking about how to pull together and expand on what ABC did, this popped up. And I remember the women over at ABC owned television station said that this is definitely something that they would love us to address, in addition to just disparities in education altogether. So the school to prison pipeline is a national system of local, state, and federal and public safety policies that push students out of school and into the criminal justice system. It disproportionately targets youth of color with disabilities and varying socioeconomic statuses. Could you guys really break down for me, someone who's hearing this term for the first time and who doesn't have children for herself,
Let's do
what it is?
Sabrina, not to interject, but let's do a quick little intro first
Of
who
course.
we have here. So everybody is aware of these superstar panelists.
I know, I was a little shy to talk about Mr. Cook and Mr. Johns and Dr. Brown.
It's all good. That's why I'm here. I got your back. I got your back. So we have Akbar Cook. He's a passion-led educator whose huge heart has resulted in the empowerment of his students. Thank you so much for joining us. Your innovative mindset, deep cultural insight, and you've created solutions to uplift and educate children. You've attracted Oprah and Ellen, and you're always at the forefront of your work that you do in Newark. And you're also a part of the Ebony Power 100 list. Great to meet you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Another Ebony Power 100 honoree we got on the line is David Johns. I love David. He's my guy. We actually created this amazing program together when he was with the White House. Our forever president, Barack Obama, appointed him. I wrote this down because I always get it wrong, even when we were collaborating. He was the first executive director of the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans. And one of our editors did an extraordinary piece on Black men and their sons and everyday life and trials and tribulations that we go through. And we ended up doing this really great program across America with David Johns. And I just have had a love affair with him ever since. And after he was done with the White House, he started his next chapter, and he's currently serving as the executive director of the National Black Justice Coalition. It's a civil rights organization dedicated to the empowerment of Black, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people living with HIV and AIDS. And their mission is to end racism and homophobia. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So happy to be here.
And our last but not least esteemed panelist, who was a part of the ABC series, is Dr. Tadiana Brown. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Adana.
Sorry for that. You are currently the interim superintendent of LAUSD West.
So I'm the local District West superintendent in part of LA Unified.
Thank you for correcting me. LA Unified is the #2 largest school district in the country. So as I homeschool, I am giving you lots of love. We saw your amazing story on the series. You know, you're a young single mom. You overcame so many challenges to get to the place where you are now. Such an inspiration to all the young Black women out there in the world. And, you know, you're teaching your 4 sons and students of LAUSD to think and learn how to fix years of generational and systemic racism. So thank you so much, all of you, for being with us today. There's so much to talk about in education. It's kind of crazy. Let's kick it off with you know, the school to prison pipeline. How do we shut this? Well, first of all, can you pretty much break down what the school to prison pipeline is for us, Doctor?
So what we typically tend to see in our less affluent communities is that students enter pre-K with word gaps, right? We won't even talk about kindergarten because we have, our transitional kindergarten programs. Even kindergarten, they start at a deficit, right? And so that word gap already exists when we start comparing our affluent communities versus our communities that are impoverished, and that compounds with our compulsory education laws. In terms of attendance, we have 20% of kindergartners attending 98% of the time, right? So we know compulsory attendance laws don't begin until first grade, but already, if you're missing at least 7 days, you're behind your counterparts who are attending and in seats 95% of the time. By the time we get to second grade, our students are at a loss at fluency levels. So the reading skills are not there. And then we start to move into reading comprehension, where they've moved out of learning to read and now they're reading to learn. So by the time we get to grades 3 through 5, that academic deficiency becomes masked by behavioral issues, right? And then we start to see the over-identification of our Black students in special education, because we start looking at, oh, well, maybe this is why they can't read, or maybe this is why they can't participate, but not really addressing the issue of the gap that started in the first place. Then we move into middle school and we see social promotion, right? And because we still haven't addressed the issue of students who are grades behind in terms of reading and math and literacy. By 9th grade, we know that students who do not pass algebra or are not prepared for algebra have a less likely chance of going to college and even finishing college. So algebra is kind of like that conduit that gives us a lot of insight on what is going to happen as part of that trajectory. So at that point, students either drop out, or they are just there silently waiting in the wings to just, be compliant.
Interesting. I'm just still trying to figure out how kids are being passed from grade to grade and they aren't at grade level. It's baffling to me.
It shouldn't be, Nicole, right? Because traditional public schools work exactly as they are designed to. And so I echo if this were Instagram, I would double tap on the heart of everything that Dr. Brown said. And I want to step back. The kindergarten teacher of me wants to try to make this as plain as possible. The achievement gap, what we continue to talk about, what has been normalized as the achievement gap, is but a manifestation of white supremacy. And again, I say that the system works exactly as designed. We're talking only about traditional public schools. We're not acknowledging in this moment, although I will name it, that there is a private school system. There's an association of independent schools and elite schools, boarding schools and day schools that are outside of the bounds of the policies and practices that govern the way that traditional public schools function. And to underscore the point that I'm making about the normalization of white supremacy, let's all be clear that, as John Dewey said some time ago, public schools work to select and sort students. The achievement gap is often thought about based on test scores. Test and accountability systems that have been developed around those tests were introduced in America first to keep individuals with disabilities from being able to access opportunities in the military. Those same tests became the intelligence tests, the IQ tests that were normalized hundreds of years ago, that have now become SAT tests and other standardized exams that students are required to take in order to access post-secondary opportunities and other opportunities to learn. And again, at the risk of being persnickety, to make 3 connections to what Dr. Brown said and some of the earlier panelists' points about listening to those most marginalized and centering those most marginalized among us. Learning begins at birth, but the preparation for learning starts well before birth. And in more than 25 states throughout this country, early childhood education, opportunities to learn, cost more than college. That's by design. It is to prevent many of the students that have been named, students with disabilities, students who are not native, students who are LGBTQIA+, or who have parents who are LGBTQIA+, from being able to start on equal footing. The second point is that what we know based on data collected in the Obama administration, the Office of Civil Rights, which has been disbanded and rendered not functional in the last administration, is that students who are older, students who have disabilities, and students who are Black and Latinx are more inclined to be suspended or expelled than any other students. And that specifically is where we think about students being pushed out of schools that are not designed to affirm the most important parts of them, are ensure that they thrive, and they are pulled into a system, a prison industrial complex system that makes money off of monitoring them and benefiting from their labor. The last point I'll make is that there is a lack of competence generally, one, around the ways that race and racism works in schools. It is the sad reality that we continue to call Black and Latinx students minority while they are technically the majority. Black and brown and poor students are the majority of students in our public school systems, kindergarten through 12th grade. And more than 90% of the workforce doesn't look like us. It's white women. And it's white women who vote for Trump, who make lunches for their sons when they go to march in anti-social justice rallies. And it's people who stand in classrooms. There's a video on my Instagram page now, Mr. David Johns, from a mother who was upset at a classroom assignment where students were invited to talk about who won the most recent election. And it's sometimes teachers that lack the cultural competence to understand race and how it functions in society that stand in the way of young people showing up in the way that Asa Hilliard talked about. And Asa Hilliard is a sociologist who said, I've never met a Black child in particular who is not a genius. And there's no secret to how we support them. We first acknowledge them as human, and we second support them with love. And too often our babies show up in school systems. They are forced by those compulsory laws that Dr. Brown mentioned to show up in school systems where people don't acknowledge them as human. And the last thing they are met with is love.
Well, you know, right now we have COVID-19 and everyone is being homeschooled. I know there's a personal story here. I don't have children, but my colleague Nicole here has a gorgeous 6-year-old little girl named Sydney, who is full of vigor and curiosity. And Nicole, who is trying to both work from home and homeschool, has had her hands full, and we've all gotten to know where I feel like it takes a village. I feel like our whole team actually gets to help Nicole homeschool her gorgeous daughter, Sydney. You know, Mr. Cook, is the COVID-19, I mean, what is the damage that is happening by having our students at home homeschooled? You know, I keep putting in personal anecdotes, but I also have a niece who has 6 children, and she's a single mother and has to work full time, and her children range from age 17 to 2. So, you know, she's got to go out and work 8 to 10 hours a day. Of course, the 17-year-old can help, you know, but she's also got to focus on her own schoolwork because she's actually an AP student. So, you know, am I really only seeing the negative? Could there be a positive with this homeschooling? How is this affecting our children?
Thank you first, Sabrina, for having me. This is a wonderful opportunity, and I appreciate it. Thank you, Ebony. We're seeing the disparities or inequities across the country. It's not just in the urban, right? It's also in rural. So if we don't have technology, think about it, we don't have the Wi-Fi, because everyone keeps thinking a Chromebook will save the day. It won't save the day if you don't have any Wi-Fi. But let's take a family, like you said, got 6 people in the family, right? You have 1 laptop. So now you have to figure out which baby gets on at what time. So it's separating us. It's a lack of learning, a learning loss right now that's happening in all the communities across America, but it's hitting the Black and brown communities more than ever. And I thought with myself being a Google school, like we already was going paperless, and I thought that we'll be ready when COVID happened. We weren't ready. We weren't ready. We couldn't think about the mental health strain it was putting on teachers and students alike. and then parents. And then what about the parents that are unemployed? And now with me, high schoolers that I have to pick up because they're more likely to get employed than their parent at this time. So it's just so many, factors that are going on that's preventing my babies and of course any other babies in the world from learning. And it's how do we do that, but still not being a victim, and I want to say that because I'm a coach, right? Coach at heart. When you start to cry foul as a coach, your kids will take on that same temperament in a show when they play. So if I'm sitting, oh my God, life is unfair, and look what your kid is going to do. So we sitting there projecting our brokenness on our children, that the learning loss is going to be even further. So it's trying to find, you said, the silver lining and pump them up because they need us more than ever. This is the most fearless generation. And if we sit there and say, oh, baby, oh, you guys, I'm sorry you had a virtual graduation. Oh, I don't know. It's going to impact them even further. So I try, and other principals that I'm with, shout out to my OSG crew, they in here, other principals from all over America, we are trying to motivate them and push through. Like, I know it is bad, but it was bad for the slaves and they didn't give up. So why would we give up now when we're home? You said the silver lining, we're home safe. That's first and foremost. You can live to learn another day because we all lifelong learners. So I'd rather me push it back some and I'm still alive versus I'm gone and now nothing to learn. So, I mean, I can go on for days, but we literally, we have to figure out a happy medium, be saying, yes, this is going on, but look, baby, we got to fight. This ain't nothing. We built for better than this.
Absolutely.
But how sad, can I just say, Ms. Sabrina, how sad that those of us who have, who face oppression and marginalization and have to overcome challenges simply because we have skin that's been kissed by the sun are forced to find the silver lining in moments like this, right? Like practically, it's fucked up, excuse the language, but Lauryn Hill says sometimes you got to act that so people hear you. But like in a world where we tell babies that there are certain rites of passage that they will enjoy, you go to school, you work hard, you get good grades, you get to go to prom, you get this big graduation, you get to go to college. At college, you get to have this life where you're on campus and like all of these things that are literally not possible for them. Like there is a loss and a mourning that they have not had space to engage in that is going to have irreparable consequences over the course of their lifetime. And right now we're talking about the consequences of the technology gap. There are so many students who don't have access to devices. This is to Dr. Akbar's point about Chromebooks. The broadband challenge in this country is another significant challenge. There are some folks who have the device who can't do this, but we are not talking about the mental health complications that COVID has exacerbated, right? Like, let's be clear, before COVID, last year, the National Black Justice Coalition led a report called Ring the Alarm that was submitted to the Congressional Black Caucus because a suicide rate for Black youth has doubled in the last 2 decades. And that's a problem because it's decreased for every other group of children based on race or ethnicity, but for Black kids, it's going up. And again, this is before COVID. And so when you layer on top of that, the fact that like some of our babies don't have housing security. Some of them are doing homework at cars or at homeless shelters if they're still open or have access to them. If they don't have trans parents who were denied access based on this administration. Some of our babies are dealing with housing insecurities. Like some of the challenges are compounded and stress inducing. And there's not even space for them to be named, let alone for them to be addressed. And we as a village have to be mindful of that.
Absolutely. And I know schools traditionally are a safe place for some kids living in unsafe conditions where they can be removed from the home if there's abuse going on. And with everything going on during this quarantine and COVID moment, us as adults think of the stress we're going on. And like David said, we're not necessarily thinking of what the kid is going through. So a lot of the stress of the adults is taken out on the kids because the kids are stressed because they can't go to school, they can't do their activities, they can't see their friends, they can't get online because of technical issues. And it's crazy. I don't know what kind of plans Dr. Brown and Mr. Cook, you guys have in place for this generation of kids that is just missing out on so much and having to deal with all these challenges. Do you guys have any, plans that you'd like to share on how you're addressing some of these issues as things start to normalize?
Absolutely. I'm going to echo a little bit off of Principal Cook's last comment in terms of seeing, the silver lining. Yeah, we had a lot of families upset about, prom and graduation, and so, having those conversations about what does that look like, making it the best virtual graduation that we've ever had, making yard signs, and the community came together. I drove down every single street and I saw yard signs with congratulations, 5th grade culminant, and it was amazing to see the community come together and step into a different place. And in March, we were in a crisis. We were in a crisis of a pandemic. Now we are no longer in a crisis. We are transitioning into a pandemic, but also a new normal of learning, right? And so in LA Unified, we have 20,000 students who are classified homeless. That may not mean that you live in your car on the street. That may mean you live with a family member or aunt or somewhere that doesn't have your own address. We have 10,000 students that are in foster care. And we had 25% of our students that did not have broadband access, but we hustled. Right. I dropped off devices and hotspots to trailers. I dropped off hotspots to mobile homes. There was a young lady living in her car with her mom and dad, and she still had a 4.0. So these are our children who are surviving in spite of. Right. And so if we make a way, these children are going to persevere. It is about, at this point, how do we combine that academic grit with that street grit? Right. And so making sure that yes, we know students need that social emotional learning piece. So how do we now adjust our virtual bell schedule to embed social emotional learning into our advisories, into homeroom, those wellness check-ins with our PSWs, our psychiatric social workers, and our attendance counselors. We did an amazing job at creating virtual tutoring after school. We also were able to bring in teachers and students for one-to-one tutoring. And that's been very successful for our students after school. So that's that academic support. We know our athletes, parents are eager to get started. So we created a conditioning model where you have all of these elements where you can come on campus to start conditioning with your team in pods. The Verizon donated $1 million in support of our students to make sure that they have broadband access for free, right? For free. All you have to do is be an LA Unified student. In addition to that, we have a school supervision program where students K through 12 can go to school in a supervised setting with our after school staff and our supervision aides, and be in a setting with Wi-Fi, with headphones that we provide for our students. And that's happening right now. So if parents can get you there, we're also providing hot meals 3 times a day for students, hot meals. So far, we've served 78 million meals to 25 million people in LA Unified alone. And when we talk about, the health disparities, we have given 142,000 COVID tests in LA Unified through our own testing system, whether it's drive up, whether it's walk through. Kids just need to make an appointment with their families, right? So we're doing some amazing things to combat some of the impacts of the pandemic for our most affected groups of students. And this also supports that, yes, is it enough? Absolutely not, because we have a ways to go. And as David mentioned, we were at 154% of mental health cases for ages 10 through 14. The numbers of students with suicidal ideations who wanted to cut themselves, wanted to kill themselves, was at an all-time high before COVID. So we know we have to continue to reach these babies. It is not enough. So we're doing wellness checks to make sure if I haven't talked to you in 2 days or a day, I'm checking in with you. Principals, teachers, they're exhausting themselves. They're working more than the allotted hours that they're being paid for to check in on our babies to make sure they're okay, because I haven't heard from you. You didn't log in today. I need to hear you. I need to see you. Right? We need to, they're at home by themselves. I have a student who's, who's on Zoom with his little sister. She's a part of the class. The little baby sister's a part of the class, but she's on his lap because mom is at work, dad is at work. But that's okay. We're embracing it. We're embracing where we are right now. And so we know that, yes, we are not in an ideal situation, but we have to make the most of where we are right now.
Oh, I
Can I add
you.
to that? So with me being high school and us being educators, we know that we backwards plan, right? So the ultimate goal for all our babies, whatever grade they're in, from rooter to tutor, is a living wage, right? Living wage, take care of yourself, take care of your family. So in high school, it's about, this is the most informed generation, right? The phone is right there. They can, whether they got their laptop, I bet you they got a phone, right? And they can get on Snapchat and Instagram. So give them the information and show them the bag. They want the money. Show the kids, give them what that carrot that they're looking for. So I'm saying, if you break post-secondary success after high school down, I put it in 4 categories, right? Post-secondary success. 1 is 2 and 4 year colleges. If you want to be a doctor, you want to be an engineer, you have to go to school. But I'm not throwing all my kids at the wall and saying they're going to college knowing that I had a baby that struggled for 13 years. They may have 1 more year in them, and I'm not going to waste it for Sally Mae, for them to owe Sally Mae. I'm going to send that kid maybe to be a HVAC, carpentry, CDL, get them something where they do the trading and they go right into the workforce. The next one is military. And I know you guys like me, I'm a black boy from Newark, New Jersey. I hit military, I run too. But I took that fixed mindset and I went down to Paris Island to an educator's workshop with the Marines. And I said, listen, fellas, first and foremost, they had my old self in the sand, running out here, jumping out windows. Well, it sounds good to my young folks listening, but not for a 40-year-old man, right? So when we got done with that, I said, Kate, listen, General, great, all fine and dandy. How much money my kids are getting? Right, straight up. And they said, Cook, they're here for 10 weeks. They get $1,500 a month. I said, $1,500 a month? They can't do it. They said, Cook, listen, while they're here for those 10 weeks, we give them 3 hots in the cot. Basically, they get all you can eat. They can't use a phone. They can just use stamps. So they get to secure the bag that whole time in there. Okay, what happens after that? They graduate, they go home for a week, they come back to a month of basic training. I said, okay, what about after that? They said, Cook, they can become whatever profession they want that we have, and we will pay them while we're training them in that profession. I said, whoa, what's the hours? They said 7 to 3. What they do after that? They can go to school, we'll pay for it. So I said, okay, what happens after that? Cook is just like like college, 4 or 5 years, you have it, then you can stay or you can go. What happens if they go? They say, Cook, they can take that GI Bill, which is a scholarship, and they can give it to their spouse or to their kids. I said, y'all never told my community that. We are scared. We thinking, oh my God, we're gonna die somewhere. No, that's another viable option. And the last one is for that kid that's saying, Cook, I can't wait for that 4 or 5 years. I gotta take care of my sibling because my mother is not here, or I got a baby, I gotta do that. We gotta get those kids more employable. I'm not talking about Chipotle or doggone McDonald's. I'm talking about get them a forklift license, get them something where they can earn a living wage and they can take care of their family. When you lay it out like that for the kids and explain there is a cheaper way to go, and that's going to jail. And we talking about school or prison pipeline. Now you working slave wages and you doing nothing. You're doing that for free. So instead of picking up and going back to military, instead of picking up a gun for your block and fighting for your hood, how about you fight for your country and secure the bag while you're doing it? So that's what we're talking about. Let's stop with the brokenness. Look, baby, this is what you can do. Now, if you don't do it, I put my hands up. But that's what we're trying to do to break that systemic thing that David was talking about, and some of the, even Dr. Ian was talking about earlier.
Dropping knowledge. I love it. You guys,
microphones and knowledge.
We're gonna have, we need to do something specific. We need a day with our doctors. We need a day with our educators. You guys are beyond phenomenal, and I can feel.
Would you guys be open to coming back and doing something with us? Okay, great. Perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And use us as a resource. We are here to serve our community. So anything that you guys need for us to do to get the word out to the people about what's available for them, send it over, and we will, we'll get the word out across all of our platforms. That's why we're here.
And I do want to say one thing. When we talked about what we're going to do moving forward, we didn't talk about training our teachers, right? We train our teachers so that when we talk about English and math, they choose culturally relevant stories, right? It can't just be a math word problem that they don't hear their name. So we train our teachers with a difference in mind in terms of that. But we start with the word problems and the math word problems. Now we become the students that we serve, and the students want to hear their names. I go back to the picture that was all over social media this 2 weeks ago when Kamala and Biden won. You know, the picture with Ruby Bridges and, you know, the Star Wars connection, right? With Kamala and Ruby. And so I immediately saw that picture and I designed a literacy lesson plan. And I got on the phone with all my people and I was like, look, we're going to do a lesson plan and we're going to bring in this. And so right now, you know, it's like we're designing professional developments around what's relevant, culturally relevant for our students. How do, you know, and so now it's like, okay, let me bring in this story instead of this. We're no longer reading novels that are outdated, but it has to be, we have to be unapologetic around how we service our students. We have to bring families together and not be afraid to talk about it, to label it, to call it what it is. We even in LA Unified or in Local District West put together 19 schools called the HEAT schools. And that HEAT stands for Humanizing Education for Equitable Transformation. And so we really look at it with a lens of how are we going to help these Black students retain Black teachers, provide professional development that's above and beyond what we're already doing, put funding in places that require us to say, we're not going to follow state norms, right? Just because you have 500 kids, you get one assistant principal. Just because you have 500 kids, you get one counselor. No, they need more than one counselor. They need more than one assistant principal. They need more than one of everything, because equality and equity is not the same thing. So we can't keep acting that like, oh, I'm going to give you these funds, or I'm going to give you these positions, and we're going to help students that way, because it's not. They have different needs and they need to operate differently.
Absolutely.
Before we wrap, can I say thank you?
Yes.
Thank you to Ebony for making space for us to continue to talk about supporting, protecting, and teaching our babies.
Absolutely.
Thank you to Principal Cook and to Dr. Brown for leading by example. I want to name that as my mentor, president of UMBC, Freeman Rabowski, says, educators do God's work. And there are so many adults who are being reminded of that as a result of the novel coronavirus. And so any of the educators who are here now, I see Principal Cook brought his crew, I support that. And any educators who access this later, I hope you hear my heart when I say thank you. And I also want to name that we've talked about a lot, but have yet to scratch the surface. That's because the opportunities and the challenges here are plentiful. We have not yet named or talked about the reality that more than 50% of students in high school identify as anything other than strictly heterosexual. It's why I left my job working for the smartest person I ever met, Michelle Yvonne Robinson Obama, and her husband, Barack Hussein Obama, to lead the work that I'm leading now. And because we don't have data that even acknowledges that students with intersectional identities who are Black and living with a disability, or Black and LGBTQIA+, or Black and Latinx exist. And so I want to offer up the National Black Justice Coalition as a resource to educators who are thinking about cultural competence, not only around what it means to be anti-racist, but also to make space for diverse sexual identities and gender orientations and expressions, and look forward to engaging in conversation with anyone who is seriously committed to making space for all of our babies to not just show up and exist, but to thrive.
You know what we will do is, especially for HEAT and your coalition, we will create some real estate on ebony.com and help create furthering the agenda for you. Absolutely, Mr. Johns.
Thank you.
Thank you, our educators.
That was fire, and OSG is.
I know. I mean, the fire is real, and we need more Black teachers and Black administrators. I mean,
Yes.
This is the type of fire that's going to change the trajectory of our kids' lives and shut down this prison pipeline.
So you let that OSG crew know, Mr. Cook, we're doing more with you. We're going to do something more.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Sabrina, I'm talking about, we have Black educators from all over the world, and it changed. Now we in Scotland, we in Tanzania, Africa, we in LA.
Let's do this.
Awesome.
Dr. Brown. So yeah, so it was a bunch of dope principals trying to change the world. So thank y'all, OSG, for coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Woo, Nicole.
That was strong. I love them.
We keep getting better and better and better.
I know.
That was fire. And now we
got to have people on fire to get these kids together, get our babies on track. So I can't say enough about Dr. Brown.
Now we have the segment, and we know these people we're on CPT, and I'm sure this panel will all remind us that time is money. And especially if they were punctual, sat around and wait. So let me start introducing some of the gentlemen first, then you can introduce some of the ladies we have in this panel. I'd like to start with
the panel. What is this panel?
Oh, the panel itself. Thank you, Nicole. Generational wealth and gentrification. I actually stumbled over saying it. That's not something we in our community actually discuss a lot. It's not prevalent. It's not something, I hope that that's changing. I know that the people we have on this panel will help introduce it. It's something we think about in terms of leaving a legacy. I actually don't have a firm knowledge on generational wealth. So I'm glad we have a panel of experienced advisors who will delve into the topic of what it will mean to leave a financial legacy for those who follow behind them, and what some of the paramount responsibilities are that set the stage for long-lasting financial stability for their families, as well as, gentrification and what's happening to our neighborhoods and our communities that are creating a challenge for us to do that. I'd like to start by introducing the man who created a kingdom, Mr. J. Alexander Martin. Jay, he heads an empire built on originality, urban influence, and industry-changing music. Some of his successful ventures in the fashion industry include the iconic clothing line FUBU, which for us, by us. And he has he has a nonprofit and a consulting firm. And he is rightly portrayed as the man who made urban culture a part of mainstream. So thank you so much for being here, Mr. Martin.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thanks, Ebony.
I will also like to introduce someone near and dear to my heart. I have two gentlemen here that are near and dear to my heart. First, I will introduce Gerald Lewis. Are you here, Jerry? I hope he is. Do we see him?
I do not see him.
I do not see him. So we're going to skip over him and come back to him when he gets on. And I'll introduce someone who I know very well, and that is Stuart Alden Taylor II. He is the founder and chief executive officer of the Taylor Group, a private equity firm that builds and acquires businesses in partnerships with high potential entrepreneurs. Since 2002, the Taylor Group has invested in quite a few companies in industries such as healthcare, technology, business services, and education. He serves on the board of directors of the Ball Corporation, Hillenbrand Inc., and United Stationers. Stuart is also on the board of Youth Guidance, a Chicago-based organization that focuses on improving the plight of at-risk public school children. At Youth Guidance, he's a co-chair of the advisory committee of the nationally acclaimed Becoming a Man program. Bam! He's also my big brother. So Nicole, don't go easy on him.
Hey, I've been waiting to meet you. Sabrina speaks so highly of you. She also told me you have some property and some places that I have yet to visit that are on my bucket list. So we'll chat about that after. And I want to take the ladies, if that's okay, Sabrina.
Please, please.
Yes, we have two beautiful women here with us, the Mckissicks. And not only do they have a last name in common, but they look identical because they are twins. These ladies, Cheryl and Daryl Mckissick, are amazing. CEOs of Mckissick and Mckissick, the nation's oldest Black-owned design and construction firm with offices in DC and LA. Their award-winning businesses have been passed down for 5 generations, starting with their ancestor, Mosaic Mckissick, who was brought to the country as a slave by a contractor who used him as a builder. The Mckissick projects are respected nationwide and include the John F. Kennedy Airport, the World Trade Center, the African American Museum, the Obama Library, the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. I could go on and on and on. These women are doing their thing. I love them to death. Welcome so much. Thank you for for being here. You ladies were a part of the Our America Living While Black series, and I was just floored to just see you in all of your beauty and brown skin, doing things that a lot of us didn't even know that you guys were doing. So thank you for being here and for inspiring a generation of young Black women. As I mentioned, you know, you come from a lineage of construction, and it's interesting that there's still this racial gap that's persisted for more than 150 years after emancipation. Can you talk to us a little bit about how your family's been able to sustain your family name, business, prestigious reputation, and quite frankly, wealth?
Well, I can say it took a lot of perseverance. Perseverance, and I also have to add to that prayer. You know, we have a great story, as you just said. It dates back really 230 years. And our grandfather and his brother were the first Black licensed architects in the country. So there were a lot of events that took place over these last 2 centuries that continue to propel our company to greatness, so to speak. And so having a reputation, having credentials, or being the first Blacks to have certain credentials has certainly helped. But then there's also this flip side to success, and that is giving. We have a legacy of giving back to the community, whether it's building in the Black community, the churches at cost, which is somewhat of a tithe, if you ask me, to training and hiring Black professionals, architects and engineers, which again, were able to start their own businesses.
And I would just add that, you know, we have had a great history, and some of our projects have shifted how America thinks as a country, the paradigm of Mckissick, and is, you know, at the forefront of our national mall. But it hasn't been without challenges. It hasn't been without unfavorable verdicts. And we've just had to stand strong through all of those challenges. And today, Cheryl and I are still experiencing racism in our industry. And, you know, we just have to continue to fight through it. We do pull up on our ancestors that, you know, when you think about what they went through, the obstacles they had to deal with, you know, we just say it's easy for us to do it today than it was for them to do it back then. So.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And
So-
you know, I don't think we mentioned, Nicole, the 8 billion Terminal 1 at JFK Airport and the World Trade Center Oculus. I mean, what haven't you guys done?
And as a matter of fact, when you talking about our locations, New York was not mentioned, but we have offices in New York. My sister in New York and Philadelphia. And I'm DC, Chicago, Baltimore, LA, and Dallas and Austin.
Oh,
So.
yeah, I just left off a few. Sorry about that.
But New York is huge.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you are employing Black architects, Black engineers. I mean, this is how we help create and generate generational wealth by, you know, somebody making it within our community and continuing to pass it down. I know that's been a sore spot within our community that other communities have is keeping the wealth within and turning that dollar over. So I just wanted to
To
mention
that point, Nicole, you know, our grandparents did pay it forward. And we have a new venture in New York called Legacy Engineering. And it's about creating Black entrepreneurship. It's a company that I started with a partner, John Rice, who is an engineer. We provide mechanical, electrical, plumbing design for innovation in building environments. And we also are going to turn our company over to Black entrepreneurs, Black engineers in the coming years, probably 5 to 6 years, which is another way to, in our little world, to create Black ownership.
I love it. I love it. Oh my goodness. It's so good to hear. I mean, ultimately, it all falls on us. If we don't take care of our community, who is going to do it?
Absolutely.
And I did want to mention that although you guys are twins and you have a company together, you both each have successful independent businesses and professional ventures and passions. Cheryl, can you talk to us about how your passion projects are paving the way for people of color? I know you just mentioned one of them with this.
Yeah, that's Legacy is one of our newest ventures. But we also work with various boards like ACE Mentor Program, where we go into the schools of New York City and we get the students interested in architecture and engineering by having after-school classes and then actually having them produce some type of project that we in the AEC, which is Architecture Engineering Community, judge, and we have a winner who receives a scholarship. And we do that in New York City schools, which are predominantly Black and Latino. And so that right there is an excellent opportunity to guide young people into our field, which in the long run, if you stick with it, can build wealth. Another thing we do are study groups. We have study groups of college kids who can come into our company, whether it's Mckissick, whether it's Legacy, some internships that are paid, some are not. But if they prove themselves, they can get into the pipeline of our company. And so it starts, with the youth and the young people and getting them involved in STEM. I heard the conversation early on. If you don't have algebra, or if you can't do algebra, you're in trouble. And so, the algebra though can lead to a very lucrative job or business in the architecture, engineering, construction sector.
Love it. We're going to have to hook you up with our educators that we just spoke with too to help expand this, because you guys are all on fire for our youth. I love it. Daryl, would you like to jump in and talk about some of your passion points?
Yeah. So I have called on our industry and put together a 7-point plan to combat racism. Because I look at our industry, we actually spend over $1 trillion a year. We employ 13 million people, which is 9% of the workforce. We are in almost every community and every industry with the design and construction work that we do. So we touch all parts of the country. So who better to help change where we are today and create wealth for Black America than us? And, really, I talk to my private clients, which are the Fortune 500s, and ask them, hey, how can you have sustainable relationships with minority firms? And what's that mean? What that means is we can break ground, but can we gain ground? If you have sustainable work, we can gain ground, because what's the point in winning one job and then stopping and not having the next job to go to? So we look at ways to build capacity in all the cities that we're operating in. Because we manage billion-dollar programs, we can take those dollars and say, let's find someone. I'll never forget when we started a convention center here 30 years ago, and we were going to move 2 million cubic yards of dirt, and we could not find a Black-owned trucking company. So we pulled together a couple of African-American men that had trucks
and helped them form a company. And by the time we finished that job, they had a company. And then when we moved to the Nationals ballpark, you know, they were now 20, 30 trucks. When we moved to the $5 billion school program, they were 40 trucks. You know, that's how you create wealth. So what I'm saying to the industry is, you know, you have to use minority firms. You have to create sustainable work for them and in a prime role. And also, you know, the great thing about this is so many different levels. It's just not firms, but it's also individuals. Put together programs to promote African Americans in your business. Put African Americans on your boards. Most of the majority companies in America do not have an African American on their board. You know, and also use the community you're working in. A lot of our construction goes through many of our African American communities. Why not buy your food, your lunch right there in that community, as opposed to going across town to bring your lunch in? So there are many points. I just don't want to go through it all right now.
No, you know, we're gonna get those up, just so you know, Daryl. We're going to be showcasing those. So
okay,
we will make sure everyone gets each and every single one of those seven points. Mr. Martin, you've been in this game for a minute.
Yeah.
I think FUBU, what year did FUBU come onto the scene?
Well, FUBU started in 1992, so it probably took us about 4 years from there to really make a real big impact.
Do you find that it was easier to pave a way for creating generational wealth back in 92? Do you think we have more opportunities now? Is it, what are your thoughts? How does one pave the way?
I think, you know, the first thing about paving the way is just starting. And I think that a lot of people think that they can't do what, either they don't see somebody else out there or they can't do it themselves. And I just push people to just start something. And then after time, it will become something if you stick to it. And that stick to itness will always drive you to keep going. And that will create general wealth. And I think also too, not necessarily, it's never easy. You may have more resources, but it's still not easy because the work is the problem, because a lot of people don't want to put in the work. You know, you go, and what, being an entrepreneur, you have to, you know, it's not for the faint of heart. You know, so some people stop and they step back and they say, well, listen, I can't do this. I'm going to go back and get me a 9-to-5, because they can't relate. They may have other bills, they may have other things, and they can't just sit there and stick to it. What we did, we blew up the bridge behind us and we just went out there and just did it. And that's where we are, you know, today.
And, you know, Stuart, I know that you have had a direct hand in motivating and cultivating young entrepreneurs. And for every 10 that come your way or 15 that come your way, one actually is something. How are you finding that we are plentiful, or is it hard to get us focused? Is it hard to grow us?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And it's a pleasure to be on the panel with such esteemed panelists. So it's happy to be here. You know, I think that I'm a big fan of entrepreneurship. I spend my life's work is investing in, partnering, supporting minority entrepreneurs. I think it's an underserved part of our community. We're underrepresented. And as you've heard from the examples here, it can lead to an amazing lifestyle and freedom and independence that, you know, going back to getting, as he said, a 9-to-5 won't often permit, but it is difficult. And it is risky, but everything has risk these days. So I view the risk as one that I think more people should take. And I'm all about trying to help them identify how to structure their businesses, how to identify capital, debt, et cetera, to help launch them into business. if we're not in a position to be blessed enough to inherit, then we're going to have to do it on our own. And so that's really what my passion is.
Jerry, you joined us a little bit late. I want to introduce you. Gerald Lewis started his financial career working in wealth management and investment banking. He's the partner in an international private equity company that specializes in real estate, energy, technology investments. He also owns a venture capitalist company that specializes in film and entertainment. He very quickly saw the gap between minority community and their ability to create general wealth in our community. So, creating wealth in this space is a mission for him. I have a question for all of you, but I'd like to start with you, Jerry. How do you identify where you want to invest? We're in a situation right now where in 2020 itself, you've seen just a political divide, but also a community relations divide. And in that, we know that we are going to have to take care of each other. Where does a Gerald or a Stuart or a Jay Alexander, where do you guys decide the money that you've built up to invest? Where do you decide the right and safe places to put it?
For me, it's been entertainment. I saw, by the way, thank you for having me, Sabrina, on this panel. I hate that I came behind Stuart, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here. For me, it's been entertainment. I saw entertainment as a viable vehicle as an African American with returns, the potential to have higher returns historically. They outpace traditional investments. With that being said, the risks were exceptionally high. So for me, I'm really agnostic at this point in my approach to investing. So as a minority, there's just new opportunities. You look at COVID right now, there's new opportunities in COVID. And we have to be limber enough to make those changes to switch. So I'm pretty open in my approach.
Mr. Martin and Mr. Taylor, do you find right now the market is more open to you? Is there more opportunity in the disarray that has been out there? Or are you finding places to invest your time or money?
Please, sir, start. You can go first.
Well, I think you mean in the time of COVID?
Yeah, or just 2020 in general.
I mean, I think it's the time that we're in, and this happens to be the time of COVID. I don't I don't know that COVID has provided a lot of unique advantages, but I think there are certain things that are available now. For example, this forum that we're all sitting on together. One of the things that's happened in the time of COVID is pretty much everyone is reachable. It's easy to get to people, easier to get to people now. So it might have taken, you all months to put a panel like this together and getting us all available and get a date where now you can get to people. That's one thing. The other thing I would say during COVID is my experience is every single person in the world is going through a very introspective process. They're questioning what their goals in life are, what their mission is, why they exist, what their passions are. And it's something that we all have in common with each other. So as I work with entrepreneurs or even wannabe entrepreneurs, I find everyone is receptive to talking. So if they thought they were, quote, stuck in a day job and would never pursue entrepreneurship, these days, they're considering it. They're all thinking about doing something different, something new. So the dialogue is rich and people are available. So there are some benefits. There are a lot of costs and there's a lot of anxiety. But there's a phrase that I like that on our corporate boards we use, which is never let a good crisis go unrewarded. And I think people need to view this as not an opportunity, if they can, to sort of wallow in their misery, but to figure out how they can leverage this while everyone else is sort of paralyzed into opportunities. So.
And if I can echo that, I always look at it as don't look at it as a setback, look at it as a setup. Take this time to reflect and find out what you do best and take that, maybe turn that into something. They always say if you have a job or you have something that you do and you're doing it because you love it, that's the stuff, that's what you really should be doing. That's what I always say. And again, back to just, our mantra is always for us, by us. And right now, to me, I think that even took on another meaning, since we started in 1992, at least that slogan. And now I just see a influx of people just wanting to actually be an entrepreneur or want to actually understand about building wealth or understand just about culture, about what we should do and how we should collectively come together, and how a lot of these mediums like Ebony and the like are coming together and bring us all together via via tech. Tech is great. It's just how we're using it to kind of get the word out to a lot of young kids. And because, what we do today is now before us. We're done already. What we do, our legacy is what we leave to our people, or we leave to others. Or even if I don't have kids, and I'm just being, straight up, I don't have kids. So I don't necessarily have someone to leave it to. So I leave everything, all my knowledge, and put it on the table and give it to anybody and everybody that wants it. And I try to give it to people that don't want it. Why? Because I know that the people that want it, they're going to do something with it. But how can we change the people that don't necessarily know where they want to go? Those are the people that I try to reach.
And I wanted to talk. You brought up legacy, which is really where we wanted to focus. And coming back to Cheryl Mckissick and Daryl Mckissick, so many Black families don't have how many generations now of legacy and wealth and knowledge in a trade or a focus to pass down from generation to generation. When I think about your story, was it your great grandfather was a slave, and the slave owner taught him how to make the bricks to make stuff on the plantation, and now you turn this into, $8 billion projects, World Trade Center, the National, the Museum of African American History. The legacy. Did you find? How do you pay that forward? How do we do that? Because I know as we go through to Stuart and Gerald, who do have children, I know that personally, because I know Stuart, I know that his commitment is to leave a legacy for his children. And I know that is for Gerald as well. So how do we do that? How do we as a community wrap our mind around something that we're not that familiar with?
Well, I would love to be adopted by Jay, since he doesn't have any children.
I like twins.
I have some children he can have too.
Yes. But, Cheryl and I do have children, and they are very much involved in what we do. Now, they don't go to the office with us or anything like that, but we have a lot of family time where they, experience Cheryl and I talking about, what it means to run our company. And we try to educate them on our history. And we try to get them interested in the STEM, like, science, technology, and engineering. But you never can determine what your children are going to do. They have to pick their own path. And so you do have to look at alternatives. Your child may not go into your business. So how do you maintain it, and how do you keep it going? And there are a lot of experts out there that can tell you how to do that. I'm not one of them. But there are many options. I just want to add to what Daryl, said earlier. You know, when you talk about a path to victory, you know, you're talking about setbacks, you know, detours, unforeseen conditions. And when we as Black people find a path that works, you know, we have to be intentional about getting that information to our young people. We have to be intentional to go out and, you know, explain to them, this is the path we took by being, you know, a part of this panel tonight, you know, by writing books, whatever we can. And on the whole notion of succession planning, you know, we have to think about, first of all, succession is coming whether you plan for it or not. I'm sure everyone understands that. And so when we do have businesses, and a lot of our businesses are small businesses run by families, we have to think about the succession of the leadership and the authority and the ownership, and, you know, what does the management team look like? We have to think about simple stuff like insurance and irrevocable trust. I mean, just this is how we can pass wealth down from one generation to the next.
Jerry, you were going to say something?
I had a conversation a couple of days ago with a wonderful woman out of DC. She and I, we've been discussing the issue of Black institutions not having endowments. So a few years ago, she and I had the opportunity to speak with one of the Black college presidents in Nashville. And one of the things that I found was that Black institutions are land rich, cash poor. So as I did further digging or probing into these institutions, a lot of them don't have endowments. So I think if we focused on our institutions, on creating some type of sustainable legacy through foundation and charitable gifting, I think that umbrella or that concept could help the next generation move into succession planning a lot smoother, because it provides a model and example.
Yeah,
I just wanted to jump in really quickly. You talk about kids and you know, creating this endowment and around the Black colleges and universities, but there's a new generation of kids, and not all of them are interested in the traditional way of making, you know, taking it to the next level. There's social media, they want to be influencers. You know, now things are different. I mean, you look at Facebook, he didn't finish college and he's, you know, looked at as a god. So many of our young people, look, you don't have to go to college like our parents and their parents have been saying. But what do you guys think? Is wealth still directly connected to education level?
Can I step in for that?
Yeah.
So, you know, again, everybody knows I have 3 partners: Carl, Brown, Keith, Perrin, Damon, John. Neither of those 3 went to college. I'm the only one that went to college, and I didn't even finish. But I don't tell people not to go to college. I tell them that someone should go, not necessarily to go and get a whole bunch of degrees, because you got to talk to them how they want to be talked to. I tell them just to go to have a resource to fall back on, I think that's really to fall back on, but to have another eye on what you're doing in business. Because when I would go to school, I went to FIT, I would fail. But today, if you flipped it, I could teach that class.
Right.
You know, so a lot of times you take what you need. I always say after I speak around, you know, I speak over a lot of places, I say, take what I say with a grain of salt and sprinkle it into your life. So that's the same thing you have to do with college. And when I also tell people that, you know, when I say go to college, I say, if you have a major or you go for your major. So I necessarily if let's say you go into fashion, don't go and make your major designing. Make your major business and minor in what you really want to do. because I always say it's the fashion business, it's the music business. And a lot of us don't deal with the business part of it. You know, a woman could say, oh, I do hair very, very well, and have people coming over and doing their hair all the time. But take that person and put them into a salon, and now they have to do certain things and be an accountant and be a manager and be a psychologist. You have to do all that, and it's just too much for them. So that's why
I think that's interesting. And Stuart, I won't brag on you too much, but my older brother is Yale undergrad, Harvard grad, got his MBA there. But I know you now have two one post-college age son. What is your position on education? Do you feel, do you think that traditional route? Do you agree?
Well, I think education is obviously important. But the question is, how do you define education? And you can get education on the job, you can get education through mentorship from your family, you can get education in school. So education for the sake of education, I guess it's fine, but really what's fine is that you learn and experience and you absorb, and that your mind is fertile enough to pick up on things. My older son, as you mentioned, went to Emory, and unlike me, did not pursue a career in investment banking like I probably would have liked him to do and go a more traditional route. During college, he volunteered for Stacey Abrams when she was running for governor in Georgia. And as you know, she did not win, but he made that connection. And then when he graduated, they hired him. And so he worked at Fair Fight, at her think tank group. And 18 months later, he's in the middle of the most important political event in our country as Stacey Abrams in Fair Fight delivered Georgia to Biden. And now he's working for the Ossoff campaign in Georgia. And what he would say is he's gotten in 18 months, like 2 PhDs from his experience worth of learning. From what he's been exposed to the fact that he just recently went back, and I know I sound like a proud papa, but he went back and gave a talk to his high school. And one of the things he said to him is, be careful what you write on social media, because there's someone like me doing research on you 10 years ago on stuff that you've done and said that you might get exposed by. And that's something that he learned through his experience. He passed on to someone else. He's a researcher by nature. He's an online social media disciple, and yet he's parlayed that now into a research job. So you can do it without a formal education. No, he didn't go to college and say, I want to study research and for political campaigns. But he did have that baseline. But I want to say one other thing connecting to your prior panel, which I thought was outstanding, is we do need to have the rudimentary skills necessary to communicate, to read, to write, to listen, to be persuasive, to make arguments. And if you can't do addition and subtraction, you won't do calculus. If you can't do calculus, you won't be Zuckerberg, right? And so, not that people have to go chase STEM, but you need to use your mind and demonstrate to the world that you have the facility to communicate and to understand. And I think that's the value of education. So I'm a big believer in education, but I think you can get it in a lot of different ways.
I know we started a little late and we do have to wrap, but Jerry, I think over there in entertainment, I want to put the Mckissick sisters, Cheryl Mckissick and Daryl Mckissick. If we can ever do a documentary on generational wealth, I think we want to come to you first. I think it's phenomenal what you guys have done, and especially to be two women of color. I will tell you, you're incredibly inspirational. But Jerry, one of the things you and I have connected on and agreed with is that, where politics has been failing us in current day, content and entertainment has been educating. No longer are people rushing to see, it's no longer the Kennedy era, right? We don't name the eras after our presidents, unfortunately, since I think the Obama era was the last time we did that. But we know that entertainment is a way to share stories. So, do you guys have any parting last words on generational wealth? And we didn't really touch on gentrification, so we're gonna have to schedule another one of these. But do you have any parting words on tips or tricks or advice?
Yeah, I do.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to share one. I had the opportunity to meet this mother and daughter team in DC, Community Bridges. They're actually mom and daughter, and they're doing a fantastic job of creating this business, developing their business. I looked at their structure, where they're pointing to, and they have an opportunity to pass something along, to have a successful generational transfer of wealth opportunity. So I do want to highlight that, and I'm encouraged by seeing that.
Okay. Cheryl and Daryl, any parting words?
Yes, I just wanted to say that it's great to come from a generation, like we have of builders and whatever. But Cheryl and I have had to put in a lot of hard work.
Yes, ma'am.
We were not handed, here, you can take this home for life. We had to work. And I do believe that education, we had to be educated to do what we do. There are some industries where you just cannot excel if you do not have that degree, right? And I believe the purpose of going to college is to open up doors for you. So I'm one of these people that say it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Okay. Mm-hmm. And it just opens up so many doors for you. And hallelujah to the people who made it without it. That's fine and that's great. And maybe in our industry, someone can come in our industry and do something without being a licensed PE or architect and all of those things. That's a wonderful thing. But anyway, just wanted to add that. And Cheryl.
I have an up and coming real estate broker in the New York area who's trying to break into renovation and design. I'm gonna definitely send her your way if you guys have any type of mentorship program or anything like that, because I'm in complete and total awe of what you guys have accomplished, and we will be putting your 7 points up. And Mr. Alexander Martin, I want you to know, if you want to pass out knowledge to those who may not even want it, we're going to be calling you too to create a platform to do exactly that. You're a Power 100 member, so we want to thank you for the contributions that you've been putting out as well. Do you or Stuart have any parting words?
Again, like I said, I'm just happy to be here. I'm happy to be amongst, these legacy brands and gentlemen that, have done a lot in their respective businesses. I just think that there needs to be more of us. I think that what a lot of times people do is we look at the hype and the beautifulness and the whole glass menagerie of how things look. And we go for the basketball, we go for football, we go for music, and we don't just expand our mind and be in, real estate or per se, or not even just real estate, but just be in, that's a little more than real estate. Because that's what most people will do. They'll go, oh, I'm selling houses, but no one's an architect. And to see and listen to what the two twins, I like that, the twins are doing, it's like, for how long they've been doing it and how the legacy is just astounding to really see that. And I don't think a lot of people see that, because, you got to remember, a lot of people, they just started today, meaning their whole family has been a cycle of going backwards. And they always feel like they can't be that one, but it just needs one to turn everything around. And that's what I try to preach. I also say that, when people go, oh man, it's not working, that's not working. I use the analogy of a slingshot. And the farther you pull that slingshot back and you let it go, when it finally lets go, you know, you're going to go real far. So I just try to keep that going, and that's what I look at. And again, I'm astounded by how long these ladies were doing it. I'm also in the African American Museum, so I have like a little bit of smile on my face, like, wow, they did that, you know.
I haven't seen it yet, so I gotta.
Yeah, so
but I have seen the JFK Terminal 1. That I have seen.
Okay, well, I'm the one.
Seen that. Yeah, me being from New York, I definitely seen that too.
I'm the one from New York, and
Yeah.
you know what you said is absolutely incredible. You know, it's so true. As Black people, we need to dream big.
Yeah.
There was a book created by a Black entrepreneur that gave all the locations where Black people could stay in the 60s and be safe. And that was a green book. And that is nothing but Airbnb today.
Right.
So we created something that is $1 billion company, but we did not reap the benefits of that. We are creative, we're innovative. We just need to get our ideas out there and believe in them.
Stuart, any parting words?
The only thing I would say that hasn't been said is this is not really the year of COVID to me. I think bigger than COVID to me was the legacy of the activists on the part of African Americans this year in the wake of George Floyd. And I think we have to take it upon ourselves, particularly as these companies claim that they're going to make opportunities. We have to walk through that door because we can make the demands on a different level and then make opportunities for our people. As usual, young people have led and shown the way and shown the courage. And I think the onus is on us to follow through with that. So we should use that as motivation. But again, congratulations to the other panelists. And it's an honor to be with you all tonight. And I'm very proud of you, Sabrina. So keep up the good work.
Thank you, big brother.
And
and it's actually a very nice segue. So thank you very much, Cheryl, Daryl, J. Alexander Martin, and Gerald Lewis. If you guys don't mind dimming your screens, but you know, I please feel free to stick around because we are going to welcome in Reddit Hudson and Mayor Tubbs, and I will introduce the two of them right now. And I'll start with Mr. Hudson. You know, Stuart just wrapped the conversation talking about just what we saw happen over the last year with the youth stepping up. And so I'd like to introduce Reddit Hudson. We're going into the panel discussion on policing and our criminal justice system. So I'll start with introducing Reddit Hudson. Reddit Hudson is the board chair of the Ethics Project. He is also a former St. Louis police officer who left the force in 1999 to focus on addressing systemic problems in the criminal justice system, abused police authority, and improving police and community relationship. He is the author of the critical investigative report, Suffering in Silence, which cataloged human rights abuses in St. Louis City jails, and which has led to several formal actions to address the conditions in them. We also have, and I'm fanning out over both of these gentlemen, Mayor Michael D. Tubbs of Stockton. At age 30, he is not only the country's youngest, he was not only voted in as the country's youngest mayor, representing mayor with a city of over 100,000 residents, he's Stockton's first Black mayor. He is a Stanford University graduate raised by a single mother and has an incarcerated father. When his cousin was murdered, Mayor Tubbs returned to the city of Stockton to create positive change. He became one of the youngest city council members in the country at age 22. And in 2016, he was elected as the 82nd mayor of Stockton. I'm so honored to have both of you gentlemen here. Mayor Tubbs, you participated on Our America Living While Black on ABC. And, you know, I don't even know where to start. First of all, thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You know, Mr. Hudson, this relationship, this community relationship we have, it sort of came to a boiling point. You saw it back in 1999 when you left the force, where you got out there and rolled up your sleeves to try to make a difference. And I applaud the difference that you did make. We can track the needle that you have moved, but there's so much more to go. 2020 is going to end up being one of the most invigorating but most scary years for the Black community. How do you think we can start to repair the relationship between communities of color and our law enforcement?
Well, again, thank you for having me this evening. And I would respond to that by saying it starts, we've heard talk of real systemic change, which is very necessary at this point. Hopefully, when we get a little further into the discussion, I can talk a little bit about this quote unquote pushback against people who wanted to talk about defunding the police, and we can define what that is. But the first step to healing or creating, because I don't know that there was ever a real extensive, widespread, positive relationship between Black communities and law enforcement in those communities. You had individuals in law enforcement who had built some relationships in those communities, but writ large, I don't know that there's been a time that there's been widespread trust and cooperation between Blacks and police. And it has to do with accountability. First and foremost, before we talk deep systemic change, for those who are more centrist and moderate and comfortable, quote unquote, nibbling around the edges when we talk about reform, nothing that you can do, whether that's implicit bias training, which personally I tend to discount. You can't train the racism out of police. You can't train the racism out of an officer. If he's a racist with power. To build trust between a Black community with the history that we have with police and police that serve them, you have to have accountability. That is the first order of business. When we talk about reform, we need to see real enacted accountability. Derek Chauvin, who sadistically murdered George Floyd in front of the world, stuck his hands in his pockets as this man expired. The best tool that we can use in terms of his training officers in Minneapolis not to do that, and building some trust and a relationship between those in Minneapolis and the police that serve them, is for him to go to prison for the rest of his life. Is for him to go to prison for the rest of his life. That would be an affirmative step towards building some trust or level of trust in the Black community when it comes to policing their own and acting as if Black life matters in communities when it is violated in violation of the law like Derek Chauvin did. So the first step towards building a relationship is accountability. Build out from that with continuing to work towards the real systemic changes that we need to see enacted in the aftermath of a long history of abuse in our communities. And I'll shut up because I know I'm long-winded, but Michael
we're
Brown,
definitely gonna come back to the defunding conversation.
Yeah.
But we do have our sitting mayor on the line with us.
30 years old? Wow.
30 years old.
Brother, that's amazing, man. And just the story she just gave about you, man, that's a powerful story, just what I heard right there.
Yeah.
I appreciate you, brother.
And you have an initiative called Advancing Peace in Stockton. And I know we have you on a limited time and we're running on CP time. So I really wanted to make sure before you had to jump that we could hear about it. And, but of course, Mayor Tubbs, if you don't mind sharing a little bit more about your story as well.
Well, absolutely. And thank you for the kind introduction, Sabrina. And Reddit, if we had more officers like you, or had more officers like you, we wouldn't have so many people on the street. So I thank you for your leadership and for your witness and for speaking so truthfully and with credibility about the issues and the needs for accountability and a real conversation about what's not just what's wrong, but what's never been right. Like there's never been a time in American history where policing has worked for Black people. I think that's just a conversation we have to have. In terms of myself, I've been the honor of my lifetime to be mayor and city council member of the city of Stockton, California. I am born and raised in Stockton. Stockton's a town of about 300,000 people in California's Central Valley. It's about 10% African American. And in 2016, I was elected the first Black mayor in the 150 years of the city's history. And I was 26 at the time. So I was the youngest mayor of a major city in American history to be elected. And over the past 4 years, we've been really focusing our work on equity and justice and having conversations back then that we're now starting to have now. And one of them is around how do you make our communities more safe? I decided to come back to Stockton after graduating Stanford because my cousin was murdered at a house party at Halloween in Stockton in 2010. And from that pain, I decided, you know what, let's do something about it. Let's run focus on how do we reduce the number of homicides, because we know the leading cause of death for young Black men in this country isn't heart attacks, isn't car accidents, isn't lightning, it's gun violence, it's homicides, it's shootings. And that's just unacceptable. So longer story short, we were having this conversation as a community about alternatives to policing. And part of the argument I made as a council member was that forever, we've always had cops and we've always had jails and we've always had unacceptably high levels of violence in our community. And the data tells us that in a city of 315,000 people, it's less than 1% of the population that commits 80% of our violent crime. And these are young men who are often the victims and perpetrator of violent crimes. And they've been arrested 8 times on average. So the cops know them. They're on probation. They've been involved in our law enforcement system. And that has not made them put down their guns. So in theory, the strategy has been, how do we give these young men the same attention from opportunities, from resources, from case management, from a real chance to do better as they get from law enforcement? And understanding that everybody is not going to change, particularly those that are deep in the game. But if 1, 2, 10, 20, 30 people change, that's a significant reduction. And what we saw in Stockton in 2018 and 2019 was back-to-back years of a 35 to 40% reduction in homicides, meaning more people are alive today than would have been alive 5 years ago because of this investment in public health versus an investment in more cops. And I think that's what you were talking about, Reddit, in terms of when people are saying defund the police. That part of that conversation is that we know in communities across this country, the only response to poverty, to lack of opportunity, to unemployment, to trauma has been law enforcement. And cops aren't equipped. They're not social workers, they're not therapists, and they're not jobs. So the Advanced Peace Program is one of the initiatives we use to focus on our gun violence problem with actual opportunity for the young men and a chance for them to earn money and to get cognitive behavioral therapy and things of that sort. And it's working, it's hard work, and it's daily work, but we've seen the success, and our community is now safer than it was just 4 or 5 years ago.
Amazing. I mean, I saw your story and my jaw just dropped. My best friend, she's from Stockton, her whole family still lives in Stockton pretty much, and they speak very highly of you. So thank you for your service and for everything you're doing. You know, you've been able to foster an amazing relationship with your police chief and have brought down the homicide numbers as you shared. And, you know, what advice would you give to other cities who are having the same type of situation? I mean, I know Reddit talked about, you know, once you're a racist officer, you're going to be a racist officer, but that would, I don't know how many police officers would still be on the force if we get rid of all the racist cops. But what can we do in the interim to, you know, help the situation with policing in the Black community? Because it's been a very tough one.
Yeah, well,
forever.
Yeah, and Reddit, I agree with Reddit in the idea that racism has been a 400-year journey in this country, and there's not a single program, training, book, article, TV show that's going to change that, although we should always try to make it better. But at a systems level, we can demand accountability. So I think it was Dr. King who said, I don't need, like, the law doesn't have to tell my neighbor to love me, but the law should make sure that there's accountability if that neighbor punches me in my face, that there should be some sort of check, because we know all people don't see the world the same way. We know all people aren't anti-racist. So I think accountability is the key in terms of we entrust officers, and Reddit knows this well, with so much authority, with the power of life and death, with the power to decide your freedom and your ability to move. And with that has to come a responsibility that if you violate, if you abuse that power, if you're not applying the law in a way that's procedurally just, there has to be consequences. And the consequences have to be swift, and they have to be serious, just like the consequences we give when someone murders somebody who's not an officer, or when someone breaks the law who's not an officer, that we have to get rid of qualified immunity. We have to get rid of these crazy binding arbitration processes. Makes it very difficult to hire an officer. We can't treat police unions like we treat other collective bargaining groups, because other collective bargaining groups don't literally have the power of life and death and freedom in their hands. And so long answer, but I think it's a policy conversation about how do you, like, for example, last thing I'll say, in California, I'm on the Police Officer Services Training, the Post Commission, the certifying commission, and doctors can be decertified if they don't do their job as well.
Yeah.
Same with nurses. Cops can't. There's no decertification process. So even if a cop is fired from one agency, it's easy for them to get hired by another because there's no decertification. There's no, you are no longer able to be a law enforcement officer in that way. And that there's just literally policy things we can do, because I think, and Reddit knows as well, being a law enforcement officer is a tough job, particularly in the context where you are the only response to every ill-facing society. You're the only response to homelessness. You're the only response to mental health. You're the only response to poverty. You're the only response to terrible schools. You're the only response to lack of light. Who do you call if someone's having a schizophrenic attack in your neighborhood?
Right.
911. We as a society, we fail to even equip ourselves with the tools to handle the myriad of problems that are present in our communities. And then we accept these guys who oftentimes aren't college educated, who oftentimes their only job and their only exposure since they were out the academy was to be a law enforcement officer, to be a panacea for all these ills. And that's just a recipe for disaster. And you add in like racism to that. And what we're seeing shouldn't be a surprise, but should really challenge us to think more imaginatively about how do we keep our community safe and how our officers part of the solution, but they just will never be sufficient enough to be the entire solution.
You know, Mr. Hudson, to that effect, have you found, like, do you believe that it's going to be harder to find young Black and brown men that are going to be eager to join the force at this point? Are you finding that that gulf is widening? And, you know, it's a two-part question that they don't necessarily go together. That would be the first part. And the second part would be for both of you. Is there a top-down mandate that targets people of color? You know, as a layperson, I always feel that there's somebody sitting in there's an Oz sitting in behind a curtain that's saying, please go out and arrest 15 Black people today.
Well, responding to the first part of your question,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that there is widespread enthusiasm among young Black men and women to go into law enforcement, with the exception of those who've been exposed to officers who do the job the right way and serve their community from an empowered position, which was part of the reason I got into law enforcement. I had good examples around me of how that power could be used to do good proactively. Every encounter didn't have to be a punitive encounter. It could be something where you use your position and power to help somebody in the community. But I don't know, you know, given our long history and our recent history, that any intelligent young person would look at that and say, yeah, I want to be a part of that, with the exception of those who believe that they can be part of changing that system and part of doing that job differently, which was another part of the motivation I had when I became law enforcement. As far as a top-down mandate, it's largely unwritten, and many times it's written outside the boundaries of the department itself. I'll give you a perfect example of inequity that is legislated into law. So then the police have to enforce the law, which is by definition designed to create inequity. Look at the war on drugs. For many, many years, you know, you had a different level of prosecution, mandatory prosecution for someone in possession of 5 grams of crack cocaine. You needed 500 to get the same mandatory sentence when it's chemically the same drug. So we're talking about the same thing, but we're talking about a different place of distribution. The cheaper form, crack, was largely sold in poor communities around the country, Black communities. The more expensive powder form was in your more affluent communities. And so we had a different criminal justice response to, quote unquote, that crime. So, you know, you don't have to explicitly as a chief or a sergeant is talking to your officers before they go out on patrol, say, hey man, target these black folks. All you got to do is tell them to enforce the law. The law does it for you. Now, we do have examples around the country, including here in St. Louis, of officers who have explicitly told officers to go out, and I won't use the word on this platform, but we had a guy who got fired here in St. Louis County, not city. Lieutenant told his charges, hey man, go out and lock up as many ends as you can find over here at this South County Mall today. I want to see them in your cars. He ultimately was fired, but to the mayor's point earlier relative to qualified immunity and other exemptions and protections that police unions have been able to position themselves to put into their contracts of employment, he was hired back within the last year or so, and wound up suing the department for back pay and everything. So, you know, I think with successful systemic change, deep-seated systemic change, and proactive work on the part of those officers who want to use the position in a positive way, you could bring in young Black people to this profession. It's a noble profession, but it is far too much power in the wrong hands, as the mayor alluded to earlier. It really is a tremendous amount of power. It's immediate power. As I get ready to shut up, it's not like the power of an attorney or someone influential in your community who, hey, Mayor Tubbs, I'll see to it. I'll make a phone call and see to it that X, Y, and Z never happens in your city and blah, and you have to wait for all of this, you know, back activity. Police power is immediate, which is dangerous. Just do what I said do right now, or there'll be consequences immediately, and they could be deadly consequences. That kind of power, unfortunately, falls in the wrong hands all too often.
And Mr. Mayor, I know you've got mayoring to do, but I just wanted to ask one last question of you before you go and we finish this conversation up with Mr. Hudson. As a Black man, as a young Black man, have you found yourself, I know you're a rock star now in Stockton, but have you ever found yourself in a crosshairs and not realize, they don't realize that they're dealing with the mayor? And have you had your own challenges being a young man of color, having to oversee and be responsible for law enforcement?
Thank you for the question. Not so much in Stockton, but I remember when I was on city council, my friend and I took a road trip from the Bay Area to Seattle. Mm-hmm. And every time I was driving, we would get pulled over. When we were driving in the northern part of California, like Yolo County and other counties, we got pulled over 3 times in an hour in 3 different cities. And every time the officer would start and say, are you on probation or parole? I'm saying, search our car. And I was like, no, I'm on city council actually in Stockton. They would think I was joking and start laughing. So little things like that, particularly outside the city. I mean, still a Black man in America, so those things definitely happen. I would say, particularly in the past 4 years, particularly this past year, it's been very, very, very exhausting trying to navigate all the things, because the majority of people, even despite the abuses, still want more, like cops, and actually want more cops and feel safer when they see more cops, particularly people who vote. And then you also have this sort of uprising around, a needed uprising around sort of making sure that Black Lives Matter, making sure that we're making right investments in community. And also, particularly in a community like Stockton, which is fairly conservative, and fears of looting and rioting. And then being the young Black mayor, like at one point I told people, you guys think I'm Moses, Jesus, and Mohammed. How am I supposed to lead the protests, stop the protests, protect the protesters, support the police, defund the police, keep the community safe, and be human? Like, there's no way. So I finally got to a point where I say, you know what, I'm just gonna lead authentically, and it's be very clear and very principled about sort of the statements I make and how I make it. And I realized early on, particularly during the George Floyd protest, that a lot of folks in the community, particularly young people, wanted to hear from me how I felt. Not what I was going to do, not the reforms we were making, not the progress we had made. They're like, as a young Black dude, are you affected? So I had that conversation that, yes, as a young Black man, I'm angry. I've been angry the past 4 years. That's why I ran for mayor. I've been angry the 29 years before that. And how can you not be angry when there's so much injustice, right? But then also in talking with my officers, I had to also let them know that what people are protesting isn't you individually, it's the institution. And that we know that some of you, to Reddit's point, do an amazing job and are exemplary and are great. But we also know that some of our officers aren't as good. And we also know that the system of accountability is not in place to protect the good officers and the bad officers, but also to hold the whole bad institution accountable. But it was interesting because when I ran for re-election, the police union spent $50,000 on my opponent and came against me, particularly because I was very clear about the need to end qualified immunity. Because I was on MSNBC and CNN talking about the need to invest in mental health, because I was having a conversation about how do we add, I don't care what we call them, but how do we add people who are trained in social work and in mental health to our police force if they're the one, if those are the calls we're responding to. Call them, I don't care what you call them, but they need to be trained in mental health, they need to be trained in social work if the calls are going to are for mental health and social work. So no, it's been exhausting, and it's been a challenge for sure. But also I just felt like for such a time as this, I felt it was a real blessing to be in the position during this particular time for this particular conversation. So very thankful.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing. We know you may have to bow out because we are going to continue because Mr. Hudson touched base on the topic of defunding the police and how that has sort of become a bellwether term. And I think it means many different things to many people. I don't actually know. I strongly believe in defunding the police, but when I say defunding the police, it's not eliminate the budgets. It's not necessarily the drastic step that was made in Minnesota, but it is definitely making sure that there is a social worker present on calls where there may need to be a different approach. There is a very recent case in California where a mother called the police to assist. Her son has schizophrenia. She needed help to get him to the hospital to re-regulate his medication. And something was missed in the translation. She was actually on the phone with the police department when a whole bunch of cars rolled up with lights and sirens, spooking him, put him in cuffs. And while he was in cuffs, the dog bit him in the face. And it's just, I will tell you that I don't know anyone who doesn't want to be able to pick up the phone and call for help when needed. But how do we redefine? Is there another term, or do you think that we should be more aggressive in the talks about defunding the police? I really would love to hear your opinion, because I know you touched on it at the onset of this, and I'm sure you have some opinions.
I do, and I think you really hit the core of the issue, which is a definition of terms. And there is a whole range of meanings attached to the term defund the police. What I mean more specifically is to redirect funds, reallocate. I'm not talking about abolition. I'm not there yet, because some people who they say defund the police equate that with abolishing the police, and I'm just not there yet. For instance, if we got rid of all police officers and police departments and somebody murdered your neighbor, who responds in that situation? And if someone responds to that situation, don't they need to be trained to respond to that situation and equipped to respond to that situation? Aren't those people called police? Mm-hmm. But I do think, to your point, that all of the objective data and what we know points to the fact that poverty drives crime. You need to address that before you address anything. We are in a place historically where we need to reimagine our public safety response, period. Just the police model itself has not done anything really to reduce crime, and has resulted far too often in abused rights and bodies. The example that you give is really one of the worst combinations of ingredients that you can have. Someone with a mental health crisis being responded to by someone who may have an implicit bias already, and who is prepared to act on you aggressively already. And then you, through your behavior, give him or her the green light to say that, hey, I was in fear for my life. The suspect was acting erratically. I had to do X, Y, and Z to him versus having a mental health professional respond to that situation. So I do think the idea of redirecting funds and reallocating funds is a viable idea that should remain central to the discussion. This idea that progressive politics somehow cost a few people in central state elections and defund the police was a term that cost us some House seats. No, many progressive candidates won because they were forceful, clear, and articulate in saying, here's why we need to do this. Here's the history. Here's the outcome that we will have if we respond differently relative to public safety and not just rely on this police, as the mayor alluded to earlier, in every crisis instance where police are not necessarily required. I think we are at a critical point in our history once, the president-elect and the vice president-elect are sworn in, for them to recognize the powerful movement that drove them to the offices that they are about to hold. It was alluded to earlier, the movement that grew out of the George Floyd murder was not only national, but international. And I would argue that the genesis of that movement, the way that it gained the traction that it gained, was created here, where Michael Brown was murdered 10 minutes from my house. And those young people ignited a movement that has remained, it didn't go away. It only gained momentum because they kept abusing the rights and bodies of Black people around the world, really, and here in the United States. And now we see an opportunity to address what has historically been the case, which is that police have never had the trust of our community and have always posed, in many instances, a real threat in our community because they lack accountability, because we lack the mechanisms in the contracts that they work under to hold them accountable, because of qualified immunity, because we can't, you don't have to talk to us for 48 hours after you kill somebody. You don't even have to offer up a statement yet, because you can be rehired repeatedly by departments around your municipality or around your state or out of your state after you violate the rights and bodies of folks, because we don't have a database that says this officer is a problem. All of those things should be the focus of the work going forward. And I don't think we can afford to lose any of the momentum that was created by these young people. It was alluded to earlier in your panel, the panel right before. When I got on a little early, I apologize. I felt like
it's okay.
I felt like I had crashed the party or something. I thought I was late, but I wound up being early. But Dr. Taylor, I believe his name was alluding to the fact that these young people have created a movement. Once again, it can't be ignored. It can't be marginalized. It can't be diminished. Police reform should be central. Criminal justice reform writ large should be central to this new administration's work. And I think we need law enforcement voices in that space. One of the things I'm most proud of that wasn't in my bio is I'm a co-founder of the National Coalition of Law Enforcement Officers for Justice Reform and Accountability, current and former officers from LA to New York, 99% Black. I think officers who have experience both in the community and in law enforcement, who have not lost their sense of self and their role in the community, have to be part of shaping legislation and policy and conversations, and not leave it to police union bosses who say defund the police is evil and anybody that wants to hold us accountable is anti-police. That's BS. We're pro-accountable policing, and we need voices to create a space for legislators and policymakers to feel safe enough that you got enough law enforcement on your side, man, that you can reallocate some of that money now to social workers and education in the community, jobs in the community, housing in the community, all of the things that create stability in every other community we need in our own. And you'll see crime and violence start to go down.
Oh my goodness, you touched upon so many important points. I can't even take it right now. I remember when I was in school, junior high, we had a community program where we had police officers come to the classroom once a week, talk to us about what's going on, have to stay safe. I mean, it was just a community building moment between us and the law enforcement within our community. But a couple of things. How important do you feel it is to have officers who are from the community police that community? And two, much like what Sabrina touched on with the mayor, I've heard stories of officers, Black officers, you know, dealing with racism within law enforcement.
Oh, that's big.
What is that like, and how do officers push through that? I mean, they're dealing with racism on all fronts.
Yeah, those are excellent questions. I'll take the second part of the question first, because that's a reality that many Black officers face here in St. Louis and around the country. But listen, white supremacy and white primacy is central to police culture. It is. That is an inescapable reality. And it is reflected in the activities of officers that push back against Black officers, that speak out against police abuse, who call for police accountability. We have an officer, she just retired, Sergeant Heather Taylor, was the president of the Ethical Society here in St. Louis, which is Black Police Officers Association. It's not exclusive to Blacks, but it's 99% Black. And frequently, me and her may make a statement together, a public statement, or she may make a statement on her own, challenging some abuse that some officer has done. We made we did a press conference, video press conference, following the murder of Anthony Lamar Smith, who was a Black man murdered by Officer Jason Stockley here a few years ago. And the situation was Jason Stockley was driving in his car. His in-car video camera is on, the in-car audio camera is on, which is why we can hear and see him say to his partner in the car, "You know I'm gonna kill this MF when we catch up with him." In advance of yeah. And so he takes his car, he catches up to the guy, causes the guy to, wreck his car. He gets out of his car, walks over to Anthony Lamar Smith's car, opens the door, and empties his pistol into him, killing him as he'd announced just moments before. We make a statement calling for his arrest and conviction for what he's done. And the death threats and the backlash was immediate for Sergeant Taylor. And that is a consistent pattern across the country, not only within departments where Black officers face racism, but externally, when you look at the broader culture, when you look at somebody like Pat Lynch, the president of the New York City Police Officers Association, who in the aftermath of the murder of Eric Garner in broad daylight was talking about what a great job his officers had done. When you look at Bob Cole out there in Minneapolis, president of that police union, in the aftermath of the sadistic and brutal and evil and demonic murder of George Floyd on camera, calling for, you know what, I think that officer should get his job back. That response is ingrained in the larger culture of police. So anytime you challenge them, especially as a Black officer or a Black citizen, they are ready to go to war with you. That's why I say it's so important for Blacks in law enforcement to push back against that. Our voice and experience is as credible as theirs is. I've been shot at here in St. Louis, enforcing the laws of the state. You can't tell me about the risks that you face on the job, because I face the same risk. What I know is that I police in your community differently than you police in mine. I challenge anybody watching this right now to find me a Black officer in your city's history who has ever shot at an unarmed white person and killed them. Or no, I challenge you to find me an officer in your city who has shot at a white person, period. And in the very rare instances that happens, like Muhammad Noor in Minneapolis, where Derek Chauvin killed George Floyd, Muhammad Noor killed a white woman in Minneapolis, 6 years ago now? She was unarmed. He said he feared for his life and everything. He's in prison right now, where I knew he was going to be as soon as I heard the facts of the case. As soon as I'd heard he'd shot an unarmed white woman, talking about he was in fear of his life, I knew the brother was going to prison, and he probably knew it too. The police union didn't back him. They weren't back the blue and one blue family and none of that. They let him ride on to the penitentiary. So yeah, racism within departments is a thing, and we have to create a critical mass of officers who are ready to challenge it. And I think that these young people have created a space. And let me just say this because it's on my mind. One of the most important things that in building the police community relationship, to your point earlier, Ms. Taylor, is for those young people in the movement, those people who have been actively and substantively engaged in that, to connect with those officers in law enforcement who face the kinds of internal and external challenges they face when they stand up for the community, to unite with each other and build a coalition of people who are working inside and outside the system to change it, and who can reinforce each other and support each other when those defenders of the status quo try to marginalize either side.
Well, I'm going to put your name in the hat with Biden to Harris.
Yeah.
Because we need your voice and voices like yours in order to.
Oh, Nicole, he's not getting away. I just got a text from Miss Denise, who said the podcast that you, me, and Denise are starting, he is one of our first guests.
Absolutely.
And we will be showcasing your organization, and
that person that
you need to
just
be
texted you
careful
is
because what?
I said that person, Denise, that just texted you is one of my wife's closest friends.
That's what she said. She said I was in pom pom with his wife, and y'all be careful because Mr. Hudson can talk all night.
I'm a little long-winded. I know. I try to moderate myself. I try to stay mindful.
You know, we do have to wrap, but we do mean that. I think that probably before the end of the year, we've been talking, so many great things have come out of the panels that we had today. And again, thanks to ABC owned television for creating Our America Living While Black. But this conversation with you, selfishly, I personally has affected me the most. I remember when I first moved to Los Angeles from Boston, and I think it was 2003, I remember I called 911 for help. And when I called 911 for help, I ended up getting arrested and charged with a criminal felony charge. My bail was set at $50,000 and my brother had to bail me out. And at that point in 2003, you know, maybe it was the effect of social media not being so prevalent, but at that point, my family was like, you can go through life without getting arrested. And I was like, I was in my own apartment. I called 911 for help. Like, what more could I have done? And, you know, I think about that. I think about, you know, probably it's something similar to what Sandra Bland experienced, probably being an overly articulate, super educated woman of color that had a mouth when things weren't going to our satisfaction. I think it's important to create accountability, but it's the bridge that I really respect that you're building. So I want to thank you for being a part of today. And I would like to, I would really love to find a way for the Ebony platform to actually shine a light on what your organization is doing. Do you have any materials that we can put up on our website? Is there something we can do with our social media to help shine a light? Because there is no way around this situation. We've got to go straight through it. And it sounds like this accountability. What's the name of the organization again?
It's NCLEOJ, National Coalition of Law Enforcement Officers for Justice, Reform, and Accountability. Very long name. When we formed it, I was argued down. I didn't want it to be that long, but I lost. So there it is. And one of our members is out there with you in LA, Cheryl Dorsey, former Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey.
I actually know Cheryl Dorsey. Yes.
Yeah, you can get directly in touch with her. She's one of our founding members. You've probably seen her on CNN and MSNBC a few times. I know I've been on myself, and we think that those platforms also are very important. We have to be part of framing the discussion. Media should never be about self-aggrandizement. What it's about is framing the discussion and the issue for the broadest audience. And because in the absence of that, opponents get to frame the discussion for the broadest audience. And that's why you got people freaking out about the term defund the police right now, because not enough of us in law enforcement have helped to frame that issue and define those terms.
Well, again, if you have some materials that we can, is there anything, how can people support your organization?
Well, we're not a non-for-profit. We didn't incorporate like that yet. We just wanted to be a coalition. We didn't want the tax burdens and all of the paperwork that came with that. You can reach us on our Facebook page, probably the best way right now, if you want to communicate directly with us. Now, we're thinking about restructuring now that a new administration is on the horizon, and we see how critical it's going to be to have voices in that space in DC and around the country. And so we're looking at that as we speak. I've had conversations with many of our members, and it's really, this is a bad team. Yeah. It's a bad team. I'm telling you. Hey, this group here, these guys, DeLacy Davis, founder of Black Cops Against Police Brutality out of New Jersey. Noel Leader, Vernon Wells, Julian Harper, former NYPD, 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement, the gold standard for the longest time of Black municipal police organizations. These are the kinds of people in this organization. And I think we're positioned to be effective and to work with those advocates on the ground and on the street who've created the movement we see now. So I'll get back to you as we complete.
Please consider us a
that
partner.
restructure.
Please
And,
consider us a
hopefully-
partner. And anything we can do to continue to shine a spotlight and create awareness.
Let me shout out to Rochelle Bilal, first Black female sheriff in the history of the city of Philadelphia. Member.
Hey,
it's
Rochelle
a bad
Bilal.
team. It's a bad team.
All right, Mr. Hudson, thank you so much for being here today.
All right, thank you. I appreciate you for the opportunity.
Yeah, it was our pleasure.
And sorry, I've had to pop off and on. I'm having some lighting issues.
No worries.
In addition to this little one popping in, but this has been amazing, and we
yes, it really has been.
Your time and your knowledge.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Mr. Hudson, and Nicole. You're the co-hostess with the mostest.
Hostess with the mostest, Sabrina.
And thank you. And I'd like to thank all of our speakers today. I just am in awe of what everyone has been doing to better the lives of those that are living in America while Black. So thank you. And we will see everybody again soon.
Yes, to be continued.
To be continued.